Ladies and gentlemen, the weekend.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
During the spookiest time of the year, there are a few guidelines all ghosts and goblins should follow. Always stay on sidewalks. Never go to a stranger's house. And never go out alone.
I'm the boogeyman! And I'm coming to get you!
You know nothing of hell.
Fear flicker.
I'm tired of living in fear.
I'm back.
New to the neighborhood.
Trick or treat!
Trick or treat!
If you are thinking of seeing this film alone, don't.
Julia, let's get this show on the road.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, the podcast of audio commentaries dedicated to discussing cinema that fascinates us in a way we hope fascinates you. We're your co-hosts, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Levi.
And here we are, ready for our third edition of Spooktober. Spooktober Spectacular. Ooh. I was about to stop this podcast and start all over, but we care about our fans so much.
We're good.
We're just gonna keep going. We're gonna keep rolling.
We're not. I was about to say we're not human. We're human.
Spoiler alert.
What is going on today?
I don't know.
Anyway, so I know that we had a water problem here.
Yes, we did.
Yesterday.
In Caldwell County.
In Caldwell County, there was a possibility of, I remember this, low pressure and high turbidity in the water, which possibly could have caused maybe some bacteria to get through, so maybe we're in a crazy situation a la George Romero, but we've already done one of his movies, so we can't get to that. Yeah. But maybe we're going crazy, I don't know.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Are we crazy for liking this movie today? Yeah. That's a question maybe we can talk about.
Yeah, it's the Texas Chainsaw, the Planet of the Apes. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. We're
Texas
done with...
C-Spot Chainsaw. What? Yeah, right.
C-Spot, the Chainsaw, Planet of the Apes.
Massacre.
We're going to be doing today 1974's. And I keep having to correct myself because I keep thinking it's 73. 74's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original film, the film that in many ways started it all when it came to this franchise, which we've not really seen any of the other movies from this franchise. I've actually seen the early 2000s remake. I saw that some years ago with some friends in college. That was perfectly okay, actually. It actually wasn't all that bad. But this is, of course, a classic horror staple.
Right.
One of the most iconic horror films of all time.
Yeah.
I think many people who haven't even really seen this movie in a loose way know, A, what it's about, and B, just know Leatherface in terms of the kind of icons of horror.
Yeah.
And
I think that it's very strange that, and we can talk about more about this later, I guess, but it's very strange that it has a franchise to it because...
It seems like so weird, specific first film idea.
And it's very much a pure distillation of itself that is very serious and... which is not the case for the sequels, I know. Although a friend of mine, very dear friend of mine, Ryan Davies, if you're listening, who will be seeing one of the other movies we're going to talk about today, so don't listen to it. He'll be listening to this. There will be spoilers of the thing we're going to talk about, but he'll know about it by then. It'll be in all the papers. He must have read about it.
Eventually we'll get around to that.
Yeah, but that he, I think, has seen the second one. I think he liked that.
I've
one
heard
okay,
that has kind of a cult following around it. I know.
Well, Tobe Hooper directed that,
and Dennis Hopper is in.
Yes, Dennis Hopper. But yeah, so yeah, it's just strange to me because it feels so much, and the ending of the movie is so definitive in what it is, and so abrupt, and
I feel like we're so
beautiful in this strange way.
Endured to it, or engendered to it by this point. But I mean, I don't know. Even like the first Halloween feels like it shouldn't even really be having a sequel, and here we are getting ready to approach the sequel to the third reboot, essentially, of this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's just we can talk about that later. The nature of horror franchises a little bit, but so we do know that there are other movies in this franchise. We haven't seen them widely. But this first one, as Levi said, is just so iconic in what it does, it really makes the point of a lot of sequels moot. But before we get into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we just gotta get into that Blue Plate special.
Hi, Audrey. Norma, have a cup of coffee, please? Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
Order up. And order is indeed up. So we have 3 items we want to talk about today. The first of which is kind of a probably the most insular topic on here in terms of the things we're going to be talking about, because it's dealing with A, an insular movie, and B, an insular release strategy associated with it. I never am brave enough to say this filmmaker's name. He's a Thai filmmaker.
I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
I'll jump on the grenade here.
Apichatpong.
We're still here, by the way.
Yeah.
Apichatpong.
Yeah.
Apichatpong. I can't do it.
Where's the cool?
Yeah, whatever.
The guy who's behind Uncle Balmy and his
past lives.
Yeah. Which we've not seen really any of his movies, but we're aware of who he is and have heard great things about him.
I don't think that's the full name of that either. Hang on.
Yeah, I might be shortening it. Anyways,
Uncle Boon Me, who can recall his past lives.
Right. So we're just dummies all around. His latest film, Memoria, which has been released in some film festivals. It played at Cannes. I think it recently played at New York Film Festival. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And has been getting rapturous reviews. It stars Tilda Swinton. Is being distributed by Neon, which has kind of been one of the low-key, quiet, not so quiet anymore, kind of indie distributors of the last several years.
Yeah.
Parasite obviously won Best Picture. They were the U.S. distributors behind that.
I think the first of their movies I would have seen was Colossus.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Which is... that was the name of that movie, right? No, Colossal.
Colossal, yeah.
Anyway. We don't even know today. It's like whatever.
It's the water again.
Yeah.
Something, when people joke, something's in the water. That was actually
something actually was in the water. Yeah.
So Neon, the distributor, I'm going to read from this is a news item from IndieWire, which I'll read the headline here first. Memoria, Neon sets never-ending theatrical tour for Weerasethakul's latest One Screen at a Time. And so the plan is, rather than a traditional platform release in multiple theaters simultaneously, the Tilda Swinton starring film will be rolled out with a, quote, deliberate and methodical approach, says Neon, moving from city to city, theater to theater, week to week, playing in front of one solitary audience at any given time. The idea is to frame Memoria as a kind of never-ending moving image art exhibit. The film will only play in theaters and will not become available on DVD, on demand, or streaming platforms. There's been a lot of consternation in recent years, and even in just this past 2 years since COVID has been with us, about what's the best way to release movies. Are movies safe to release in theaters? Are they better to be released at home? Before we even move into that debate, let me actually just tell us what Memoria is even about first, because it is an indie film with Tilda Swinton being the biggest name in it. A Scottish orchid farmer visiting her ill sister in Bogota, Colombia, befriends a young musician and a French archaeologist in charge of monitoring a century-long construction project to tunnel through the Andes mountain range. Each night she is bothered by increasingly loud bangs, which prevent her from getting any sleep. So it sounds very mysterious, and you can look at the poster for it, and it looks very...
Yeah. Well, I know that his that filmmaker's movies, he made another movie called Tropical Malady that I know a lot of people really like, that I really want to see. I haven't seen any of his films, but I know that's actually, out of all his movies I've heard of, the one I want to see the most. But it seems like a lot of his movies focus a lot on like jungles and like the natural world in relation to human beings, and so it's interesting. He's going to continue that, but obviously,
and so it sounds fascinating. It's been getting again really great reviews, but I know on Twitter when this news was first announced, people got into their foxholes and were immediately blasting back and forth. These are people who don't have anything to do for a real job.
I go on Twitter like 2 or 3 times a week now.
Yeah.
It really is an amazing life to lead. Frankly, the main reason is because I am so busy having a job, being a school teacher, that I just don't have.
Some people don't have.
I can take the time to sit down and do that, but when I'm not doing something else, I'm like, that is the last thing I want to do in my free time, is go on social media at all, let alone to see people complain about something stupid like this. Not that this thing itself is stupid, but the argument itself is stupid.
So, and there's a lot of people who live in New York, LA, or Chicago, I was seeing, who literally have every conceivable film viewing option in the world there, and are saying, well, if you don't live in a big city, then this isn't going to, be good for you, or this isn't going to reach you. Again, we live in the Hickory, North Carolina area. We see most of the movies in Hickory at the AMC. And I couldn't help but scream, that's the way reality is anyways right now, has been for years. I will say, we used to be a Carmike that we used to go to. It's been bought out by AMC. The viewing options have gotten better in recent years since AMC's been running it, in terms of showing a little bit more independent stuff. And they always showed under the AMC Artisan Films banner those movies, usually to try to even promote it or to try to market it in some slightly different way.
BS, but anyway.
And I felt like it was a mini miracle that we even got to see. I saw The Card Counter this past week, the newest Paul Schrader movie with Oscar Isaac, and quite love that. I'll maybe talk about that another day on here. But it's weird because I'm actually very much excited by this idea of releasing Memoria this way, but also acknowledge that, well, very likely I either A, will not be seeing it in Hickory, or B, will have to drive to Charlotte or Asheville to see it, and I'm actually not opposed to that. Because Asheville or Charlotte, either way, is nearly an hour change either way, and so that's not, frankly, that big of a deal to me. We've on several occasions driven to either one of those cities to see things.
Yeah.
What's your own kind of initial reactions to hearing the possibilities of a movie being released this way, as opposed to maybe being kind of an exclusive streaming release or whatever? I think that'd be what a lot of people would try to do now.
I love the idea, everything about it. Because first of all, one of the reasons, and I'm not going to be cynical, the main reason that I love it is not because it's made people mad. But I do love that about it, because it shows how entitled people are, first of all, that, like you said, this is just a reality for people like you and me, even though that eventually we would get to see the movie, but this time we don't, because it isn't going to be doing that. It's almost like living through most of the films, and most of the life of film as a medium is not going to be this way, but up until this point in history, really for the majority of it, until the 80s, this was the way life was. Until you saw something on TV or you went out to see it at the theater. This is the way it used to be. And so I guess we've trained ourselves into being so entitled that we get to see everything. And I'm sure that the filmmaker and filmmakers behind this are intending this to be a one-time experience. They really want it to be that. Now, is this kind of a headline-grabbing thing? Sure, they kind of want it to be that. But I'm sure that he genuinely feels like, I want this movie to have this sort of life cycle. And the way I understand it, it's saying never-ending tour. I'm assuming that means it will play
in perpetuity,
and will come back to certain cities. I'm assuming that's the case.
It doesn't say that, but I think that is
and who knows how long they might do it. They might do it once and then say, we didn't get enough money off of this, we might as well give up. I don't know. But I don't know. They seem pretty dedicated to it if it's not going to be on any services anywhere.
And this isn't some random little distributor that doesn't have any history. I mean, Neon is one of the growing kind of forces of independent film. I mean, A24, of course, is like the primo brand name right now for that. But Neon is a very pretty, at this point, established group. I mean, so this is not like they're not betting their whole future in the farm of their whole studio on this. This is just one movie out of many that they're making money on.
And I don't know. I kind of love everything about it. And even if I don't ever get to see the movie, that's kind of the whole point, is that like not to. And these people already get to be this way anyway with everything. They get to be this elite, exclusive type of people, the people that are complaining about this. So I think that now that such a thing is kind of being taken away from them and saying, oh, well, it's going to go everywhere but for a limited time, frankly, in a certain way, is being more inclusive to other people that they don't like to associate with and think they're better than.
And they like to kind of take a condescending attitude. Oh, well, if you just live out in, like, rural North Carolina or Iowa or wherever, you're not going to get to see it. It's like, well, that's not... You weren't seeing those movies anyways, like those kind of independent films. And, like... And again, if I have to drive to Charlotte or Asheville, I'm blessed that I live where I do, that both of those are in fairly close driving range. I don't mind to do that because, again, it's very clearly a film that sounds like it would work really well in a theatrical environment.
Yeah. And part of that's frustrating sometimes with certain filmmakers that only want to do things that way, because I know that, and I agree with it, if I could see every movie in the theater, I would, but that's just not the reality. Anymore. So I get it, that's frustrating in its own way, but everybody wants to just sit on their what at home and be lazy and not go anywhere and just be like, oh, I'll watch it, and then be on their phone the whole time anyways. So they don't care. I mean, really, deep down they don't. It's just that they feel that this is some betrayal or that they're not getting to see this prize thing. And it's like, well, that's I think the whole intent anyways. So it's one of those things where, like I said, I don't know that I'll get to see it. I would assume that I hopefully will at some point. But if I don't, I'm going to respect the idea anyways and just go, well, okay, fine. Because that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because it's the artist's medium anyway. I truly believe that. It's not... And people say it becomes the audience's or whatever, and the audience owns whatever it is. And that's to a certain point true of whatever they think about it.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately their thing. And if these people believe in auteurism, which, clearly is going further and further out the window anyways, because, I mean, like Chloe Zhao is doing this Eternals movie. You going to tell me that's going to be anything like The Rider, or that was her first movie, right?
Yeah.
Or Nomadland? Probably not, because it's all BS anyway.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against her. That's against Disney and Marvel, and, that's the whole thing. So I find the whole thing to be kind of a ridiculous argument. And I love the idea, but that's just me.
I want to read a little bit from A.O. Scott, one of our great film critics for New York Times. He wrote an article very quickly. I think it came out like the day after this was announced, called "Is Movie Going Undemocratic?" The top says, the plan to distribute the art house film Memoria in one theater at a time has set off a heated debate over whether the idea is elitist or inspired. I want to read from some of the last few paragraphs here of what he says. Let's see. And he actually at one point speculated that, well, I don't think this is going to last forever. It'll probably get a Blu-ray release at some point, he said. All right, I'm going to read a little bit from this. Everyone, that is, who subscribes to a given streaming platform or pays rental for video on demand, Netflix is not a public utility. Furthermore, the universal accessibility that is part of the ideology of streaming looks in practice more like a kind of invisibility. If you can watch a given movie whenever you want, you never have to watch it at all. Or you can pause it after a few minutes, check out something else, and maybe come back the next night. A partially read book can shame you from the nightstand, but an unstreamed movie drifts alone in the ether. That is the fate Memoria is resisting. As an object, as an experience, it resists the rhythms of home video viewing to begin with. Swinton's character, an expatriate named Jessica, seems literally lost in space and time, experiencing the world in a way that alienates her from other people and her own consciousness. She hears noises inaudible to everyone else and finds companions who may not exist. We don't know if the explanation is psychological or supernatural, or whether Weerasethakul is dabbled in science fiction, metaphysics, or some of each. What we do know is that the streets of Bogota lush slopes of Andes look beautiful in 35mm, and the sounds and images cast a delicate spell. The magic may require a theatrical setting. Abstract, slow-moving films that aren't propelled by dialogue or plot don't lend themselves naturally to couch-bound, distraction-prone viewing. Weird movies are best seen in the company of strangers. Did you see what I saw? What is it anyway? The algorithm won't help you. Memoria is hardly alone in demanding a different kind of attention, and it's unlikely that a week-by-week, one theater at a time release strategy will become a widespread business model. But there is something beautiful, even utopian, in the idea that another way of looking is possible, that habits can be broken, that we might have to go to find movies out in the world where they are looking for us. Which I think is a very beautiful sentiment to kind of be talking about this in. That, as you know, again, I saw The Card Counter this week, and that's a movie that totally will work at home. It's a great movie. It's a great movie's work anywhere. I really, truly believe that. But to see that on a big screen, on a screen that's normally playing some corporate garbage any given week, and just seeing something different on a big screen was just frankly a very exciting experience to partake in. And so, again, if I got to drive a little way to see it, that's fine. So be it. Guess what? There are plenty of other viewing options if it doesn't come here that I'll find time to watch.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and two thoughts, I guess, to part with on this, unless you have anything more you want to say about it. But the first thing is that, you know, and who was it that wrote this again? A.O. Scott. I'm assuming he saw this at Cannes.
He saw it,
somewhere.
Yeah. I think at New York Film Festival.
Or at New York Film Festival, because it played at Cannes originally, right? I think.
Yeah, New York Film Festival.
And then, you know, that's another thing is that, and he's not saying this, but a lot of these people get to see this stuff. They get to go to Cannes. They get to go to all these film festivals and see this stuff, and I said this already, kind of, they frankly don't like that, wait, that's going to kind of be that way for other people now? I know that they think that deep down. Mm-hmm. They're going to lie to themselves and say they don't, but they are an elitist crowd. Screw them. Mm-hmm. Secondly, to, you know, like we're just saying about, you know, getting to see a movie on the big screen that isn't the corporate thing. I mean, some of my favorite movie-going experiences and moments I've ever seen in movies, one of them I always think of is all of Call Me By Your Name, but specifically the ending of the movie, where it has the famous, you know, final shot of him looking at the fireplace. And I just remember being so enraptured by the ending of that movie. And in its own way, people could argue that is this kind of like even independent darling in the sense that what some people would call an industry plant, I guess. You know what I mean? Like that. They say, okay, even that is an independent movie, but it's still like a really big movie. But you know what I mean? It's still not something that you get to see I don't get to walk into a movie theater in North Carolina and see a movie that's half in Italian every day. You know, like that's just not something that happens. Mm-hmm. So therefore, for something, and you know, assumedly, a lot of this Memoria is going to be in English and Spanish, I'm guessing. But because, you know, it has a Scottish character in the movie, so they're going to be speaking some English. But, assumedly, I don't know. But anyways, like, so, yeah, of course, but it's just like you don't get to see that happen. Same thing happened with Parasite, in its own way, you know, that... when I went to see that, and I think that I kind of talked about this in my review of the movie on Letterboxd, that argued I don't think that movie is an industry plant or whatever, but you know, insert thought here. You can figure out what I'm thinking if you go read that. I kind of explain it more. That's kind of the movie everybody's always looking for as far as that type of thing. Which Call Me By Your Name is certainly that in its own way too. But I think that's Better to Like a Bear. Yeah. Anyways, they're very different movies anyway. But that in itself is a privilege. So I think making a big deal about this is important. And I think even though some people could say, what is this, an elitist thing? Like, no, I think it's actually going against that in a strange way that people, I guess, don't get. But because it's encouraging people to come out to the movies and not just sit in front of their TV. And then it is a never-ending thing, and it's going to really try to go around and make the rounds. And like I said, I doubt it's going to come to Hickory. Yeah. But it's going to come around places where it normally doesn't come around. Yeah. You know. So there you go, I guess. I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, I think that sums it up. And again, it's a movie that, you know, maybe one day we'll talk about on here if we've seen it. But maybe we won't, and we'll just have to see how that works out.
And it's like, this is an even dumber thing, but it's like that Robert Rodriguez movie that's like going to be shown in 100 years or something.
Yeah,
however that's even going to work, I don't know. But it's like that movie will probably be garbage. Let's just be honest, because it's that type of movie.
But doesn't it instantly just raise your interest of like, oh, it won't be until 100 years?
I won't get to see it.
That's almost like a marketing thing for now to get us interested in Robert Rodriguez. It was just like, something that we can't see yet, and then again in 100 years they'll probably be like, who knows what even cinema will be by then, but just like be like, okay, it'll have like a weird cultural fascination of something that was made 100 years ago that was put into a vault.
Like I would get to tell my grandchildren maybe, say, be on the lookout for that Robert Rodriguez movie, and like I'll say, I remember when they announced
the guy who made Spy Kids 13, like
I don't know, but and it's like he'll be dead by then, and he's a lot older than me. That's a similar thing, but obviously this is like something that can be seen in the moment, obviously. But I find that to be really goofy and kind of ridiculous. To be like a time capsule movie. But because frankly, I saw the poster for it, what it looked like. I guess they made one. I don't know, and I was just like, that was really dumb. But I don't know if it's very smart or very dumb. But anyway, so there you go.
Speaking of the theatrical experience. I think that's how. First of all, I think that's how we should end every segment. So there you go. Whatever, deal with it. But speaking of the theatrical experience, yesterday we saw No Time to Die on the big screen, and there's a lot goes into talking about this movie. For one, James Bond movie, the 25th Bond movie. This was supposed to come out in April of 2020, which was right.
No, because I remember
COVID was hitting.
I was seeing posters. Or trailers for it. Back, around that time.
Well, I even remember, like, it was in February and March, like, thinking about, even at that moment, like, oh, big movies that are coming out soon. I even remember printing off copies. I remember in one of the rooms at my school I work at and thinking, oh, Bond movie's out in like a month and a half, 2 months. Oh, that'll come out. And then here we are, COVID's happened, coming since then. It's Daniel Craig's last Bond movie. It was 5th. There was a lot of random pressure riding on this movie for a variety of reasons. For one, the biggest one, it's Craig's last movie. He's made 2 great Bond movies, Casino Royale and Skyfall. Quantum of Solace and Spectre are both awful. So this was kind of like, will his, quote, overall tenure as Bond be more positive or more negative? I would say, frankly, the heights of Casino Royale and Skyfall are so high that even if this disappoint a little bit, those movies are going to be 2 of the franchise's best, so that will always be remembered. Cary Fukunaga, it's also the very first American director to make a Bond movie. That was something talked about. And just in general, just finally seeing this movie get released. And it's always, I think, tough on a movie to have these, like, weird staggered releases similar to what we were on talking about Memoria, but with this.
Well, even with Tenet, we saw that in a more honestly negative sense than this, I believe. If that tells you what we think about the movie already, but
so walking away from No Time to Die and all these expectations and things that we were thinking it could or should be, what were your own impressions from it?
It was good.
I agree. I think it was good as well.
I was shocked at how good it was.
Well, and not that this means anything. But there was kind of a mix to slightly negative buzz going into it.
Which I think is strange for a movie that is this at least competent. Because first of all, I think that we came out of Spectre far more negative on that than other people did.
I despise that.
That movie is not good. I was going to say all these really bad words.
I preach this to anyone who will listen. That movie literally stole a plot point from Austin Powers and Goldmember, of that Blofeld and he are like half brothers or whatever. I don't even frankly remember some of the details of that, but I was just so angry and turned off, I kind of shut it out of my head. And in general, to me, Spectre was a bad example of Sam Mendes, the director who did Skyfall and then did that as well, of American Beauty fame. He followed that up, and it was almost just like a big victory lap. It was like, oh, wow, the last one was so great. Everybody
Revolutionary
loved it.
Road to Perdition. Right,
everybody so loved the last one. Let's just kind of do another big, cool-looking movie and just not really think at all about what we're doing and bask in the afterglow of what Skyfall was.
Well, let's have Dave Bautista riding in this, like, riding with his top down in a stereo or whatever, as that song said in Grand Theft Auto 4. But yeah, Dave Bautista running around, really stupid movie.
I just didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
And again, this seemed to be the habit of these Craig movies for whatever reason.
Yeah, which was frustrating too about that movie because it had Leah Sudol in it, who I generally really like in everything she's in. And that thankfully that was rectified here. But so this is going to be some spoilers we're going to talk about. So if you haven't seen it, don't listen.
Yeah.
You'll probably hear about it in a week.
Skip ahead a little bit.
But I guess I can try to detail the plot so we can kind of talk through. Okay, so first of all, a lot of it is based on stuff from Spectre that I don't remember because the movie's so bad I try to just block it out of my mind.
And it should be said, the Craig movies in general, more than any past Bond, have tried to really tell a serialized story, and so that means that even the bad ones
because
have
even
things in them you have to remember.
Because even the Connery movies did this, like, even those follow this basic structure of he's leveling up, he's getting towards that, but it's almost like it's like a proto video game in a way of a series of movies where it's like he's fighting this boss and then he's fighting that boss and he finally gets to Blofeld, you know, or whatever. So even that follows this very basic structure that you don't have to understand at this base level. But so with this one, it basically starts with, well, I'll just start from, I guess, the beginning. So the Mr. White character who's been in these movies was Leah Sudol's father. I forgot that until halfway through the movie. Anyways, and he was originally in Quantum, the Quantum of Solace, not both the movie and the Society, whatever. And which was eventually part of Spectre. Because these movies have been all over the place, because originally they just wanted to make Quantum of Solace its own thing, and then with Spectre, that tried to kind of go back.
Basically
and,
retconned it
right.
and said, oh,
so
it actually was
Spectre really
all along.
has destroyed everything about this. Both the Society itself and the movie. Has destroyed the whole thing. It's really screwed it up. But anyway, so basically what I really liked about this movie is that instead of having Spectre be the big deal, it's that Rami Malek's character, whose family was all killed by the Mr. White character, is enacting revenge on Spectre by basically hijacking this like DNA nanobot software that carries these viruses that kill people. And it was originally built by MI6 so that they could use it in assassinations, and it would be a lot cleaner and because as we see what happens in the movie is that they're able to use Bond, since he has the nanobots, to kill Blofeld unknowingly when
just
he
saying
touches
all that out loud.
yes.
Just
wow. By the way, this isn't the most ridiculous thing that has ever been in Bond movies. Believe me, I've seen them all. And
you have seen them all.
Right.
I've selectively seen certain whole eras of
well
them.
If you don't care, you're better off to just leave it alone. But anyways, so basically Spectre's killed off very early on, all of them, except for Blofeld, who was very soon after taken care of. But basically, Rami Malek then wants to basically weed out and create a new world order. I was reading about this on Wikipedia to try to make more sense of it. Because this is the part we didn't understand is so he kills off Spectre, then what does he want in the end? And basically that he's wanting to weed out, all these evil people in the world, like millions of people or something. And so, because it's not like the whole world or anything, but I mean, it would be like a mass, murder situation. But anyway, and I think he's wanting to, sell it to some different people too. But what we were confused about, though, and what is the most interesting thing about the movie, but what we were confused about what his motivations were towards this, were that Bond has a child with Leah Sudol, who originally she denies is his child. And then I went to the bathroom, so then maybe there was some point in there where they kind of explained that more, but you were in there, so I don't know.
I don't really think so.
So it didn't tell it, so that is his child, and a lot of it is about Malek kidnapping them to use over Bond somehow. And anyway, also it should be noted that Bond had been off the grid for some years.
Oh wow, first time that's
for
happened.
5 years though, so it's been longer than normal.
Yeah.
But anyway, and that he was working with the CIA originally to find that. And by the way, that doctor character, oh my god, what an annoying character! He's one of the most effectively annoying characters in a blockbuster I've seen in some time. Kind of up there with those two Pacific Rim scientists. You remember in that movie where there's the guy who was the I'm counting to 10 right now. And then that other guy, anyway.
I think that guy from Always Sunny, he was one of them.
That's him? Okay, of course that's why I'm annoyed by him.
What's his name? Charlie something.
Charlie whatever.
Charlie M. Charlie
Blank my mother. Yeah. Anyway,
go listen to Casino podcast.
Yes. But anyways, so yeah, there's a lot. So if that all makes no sense to you, you're
Charlie
probably
Day.
saying Charlie Day. By the way, if we have Charlie Day fans who are disgusted, screw you, get off.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyways, so if that confuses you, everything I just said, there's probably. I mean, it's a convoluted plot that I was able to follow in the moment.
And
but like
another question: does this movie need to be 2 hours and 40 minutes?
No. But it needs to fit all. Well, I would say it needs to fit all that plot in, but it seems like the plot kind of stops at the hour and a half mark, and then it's like, okay, then it's the rest of the time it's about them trying to kill Malik.
I actually kind of, in some ways, like the realism of this, but the climax where he's like having to go back up and down, up and down to like open the blast doors so they could the British Navy's like shooting missiles at this island, and all right, I got him. Then he went somewhere else, and it's like, oh wait, they got closed. Well, I got to go back up and do it again.
So that then
it felt like a video game.
Malik. So the conclusion. We're going all over the place here. The conclusion of the movie is that since he had the nanobots on him, his DNA is not in jeopardy, but Malik is able to put DNA of both his Leah Sudol and their child on him so that if he were to ever go see them again, they would die.
Yeah.
So it's basically him purposely separating Bond from his new family, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because the whole movie is obviously about, they talk a lot about time because there is no time to die.
Yeah.
But I think that it's worthwhile that being Phoebe Waller-Bridge coming on and writing this and other writers as well, I think wanted to really make this the Me Too Bond and to at least, give him a family definitively and be like, okay, what does that mean for Bond?
And like actually throw consequences towards his character.
And in the end, he decides to sacrifice himself to make the island blow up so that virus doesn't get that technology doesn't get out.
Let's just say it out and plainly, Bond dies.
Yes.
And there's very few times when you're watching a movie that you actually feel like you're watching a historical moment take place.
Mm-hmm.
And you could easily say, well, they're just going to recast this part. Of course, the franchise is going to go on. Yeah, all very true. But how many times do people say, well, I ain't going to go, he lives in all of them, whatever. I'm not going to go see a Bond movie.
Well, it isn't
and to actually see James Bond, one of the most iconic film characters of all time, die in a movie was frankly one of those moments I was like, and it was leading to that point where you were thinking that for a while anyways, but I was really like, in the moment, I was like, wow, James Bond died in a movie.
Yeah.
This is a story.
And it's not like the You Only Live Twice, like, we're far too late. At least he died on the job. He'd have wanted it this way. Like, he's dead, but he's really not dead. Like, Bond is alive. I mean, But, which, by the way, in case you didn't know, You Only Live Twice is one of my favorite movies. So, I'm not kidding if you think that's funny. That is one of my favorite movies ever made.
I'm not laughing about that.
No, I know you're not, because you actually are smart.
Yeah.
But other people are not. But anyways, no, I mean, it's a lot like, the movie reminded me a lot of The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because you have
even that pulls some punches though. This movie didn't.
No, it didn't. Yeah, but there's this kind of villain who, blah blah blah.
Well,
and
also trying to give this big love story to and its consequences.
Yes, and then also that even the new 007 is kind of like the Catwoman figure in the movie, where they're
even
kind of at
Robin.
odds, or Robin, yes, but they're kind of at odds. But then it's like, we'll help out, whatever. But and what did you think about some of the other supporting roles in the movie?
Well, let me just first say about some other things
ahead.
you just glazed over your own way. I think the whole nanobot DNA thing was 100% stupid.
Yeah.
And again, I know we're not going to be going to this franchise for realism. I get that. And it's one of those things. Usually, the longer any franchise goes on with a particular continuity, you could say, and because we were talking about this, like every quote new Bond they put in a Bond movie, it kind of scales back some of the silliness of the last ones and becomes a lot more bare bones. I mean, Casino Royale was like pretty
coming after Die Another Day.
I mean one of the follow up one of the worst, most ridiculous ones with one of the best, most like stripped down versions. But as this franchise went on, it kept getting a little more, and that's just natural. That happens. I mean, you look at what the Fast and the Furious franchise is now compared to even if you've not even seen the first one.
Yeah, but I know what that is.
was
or
looked like,
Right.
And And so I just thought that was kind of really dumb, and it made me a little bit incredulous at some points. But it set up for that choice he has to make, right? It sets up for, do I want to... And he was taking bullets, and, that's not something you normally, see him straight up take gunshot wounds in these movies either. And he
has more in these movies, Craig ones, but yes.
Yeah. But he has to make that choice. Do I put the ones I love at risk? And basically, it won't affect me. Because I'm quote kind of immune, so to speak, to this, but it will hurt others. And him saying, no, those are people that I genuinely love and care for, and that's something you couldn't really say about anyone in these movies other than Vesper in the very beginning. Yeah. And so it's like him making that choice, again, was kind of worth the crap that came before that.
Yes.
As far as the supporting characters, I think the biggest one you got to mention is Latasha Lynch playing Nomi, who is actually kind of semi-shockingly in the movie the new, quote, 007, and that was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, too, also watching that, is of someone else having that code name who's not James Bond.
Yeah.
And not only being a woman, but a black woman. And there's a lot of conversations that have been had in recent years about whenever Craig steps aside, who will be either A, the next James Bond, or B, 007 and will take the mantle.
Yeah.
I thought she was really great in the movie for the role that she had. I had forgotten because I was like, her face looked familiar, and I was like, what's she been in? She had a kind of a smallish part in Captain Marvel as a fighter pilot, and I was like, oh, yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of. But is relatively young and hasn't been in a whole lot of stuff yet, so she was pretty great. Of course, you get all the favorites back from this. You get Ben Whishaw back as Q, who is suddenly revealed he's gay in the movie.
Yes, I forgot about that. I forgot to mention that.
That's not even a big deal at all in the movie.
Well, I guess that,
I
forgot about that. Some people be like, ooh, whatever, and it's like, well,
that whole scene where you go into Q's apartment and there's like these little gong sounds kept going off. And he's like wearing like an apron.
Right.
It's like,
that was kind of random, but I thought that was interesting. I kind of forgot about that, but it's kind of like they did that, like I said, with Jungle Cruise, and it's like nobody reacted. Now that was a very much more like obvious version of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought that was interesting. I felt like that fit enough with his version of the character too that it makes sense. But anyway.
Naomi Harris's Eve Moneypenny, did she have more of a role in Spectre, I think?
She was barely in this, which I thought was one of the things that I was a little disappointed by just because she's so great, but she's really great in Skyfall.
Right.
But she wasn't in this as much.
And then old hand, one of our friends of the pod, Jeffrey Wright, came back as Felix Leiter.
I mean, he's bleeding chips.
Listen, I'm bleeding chips.
I mean, one of the great moments
just hilarious.
I mean, and there was a lot of things I think to try to call back to again Casino Royale specifically, and he was in Quantum of Solace. He hasn't been in Skyfall or he wasn't in Spectre. I don't think.
I think he was in. Yeah, he was in Quantum of Solace. I don't think he was in the other two. I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so. But
Now the Felix Leiter character has been in and out of these movies.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this isn't like this because he dies in this movie.
Yeah.
Now,
in some ways, that should have been telling us something that foreshadowing that.
But with License to Kill, the Timothy Dalton movie, the second and final of Timothy Dalton's Bond movies, which is quite good. That whole movie is weirdly a revenge story of Bond going after these villains on behalf of Felix Leiter's family who got killed. So that whole movie is basically a revenge story for his friend Felix Leiter. So not that, because this is different, because it's like, far bigger things at stake. Felix actually dies, but the whole movie is a lot about revenge. And so, like some other movies are, because I mean, Quantum of Solace is very much that too in a lot of ways. But that movie's not very good, so anyway. But so that's another thing I was going to say. There, obviously, this movie has so many different random things that are this Bond movie, this Bond movie, this Bond movie, like all these different Bond movies going into one movie. I mean, the idea of him finally being with a woman, but he can't be with her now, was like on Her Majesty's Secret Service, or even visually, the place where they're farming the DNA nanobot stuff looked a lot like the inside of the ship in The Spy Who Loved Me, which kind of has a similar ending as You Only Live Twice. Also, this had these blast doors, like You Only Live Twice, had that kind of area that looked like the closed shutters area. Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff in here that was this Bond movie. It was kind of overwhelming at a point to just be like, oh my, when you've seen all of them, and to be like, oh my gosh, this is just all these different things, which is kind of shameful and shameless of them to do. But at the same time, they made a good enough movie to where I'm like, yeah, I think this is a good enough send-off for this whole thing, considering how bad the last movie was, that it was even anything.
Obviously, anyway. Ralph Fiennes is back as M.
Right.
Now, and this happens a lot in the franchise, but I think this is the first for Ralph Fiennes as M, where he's not telling all the truth about stuff the MI6 or the British are doing, and that Bond's kind of trying to expose him or at least hold him accountable to, hey, what is this program that you had on the books or whatever. I think Ralph Fiennes is I think Judi Dench was going to be always, for me, my personal M because of the Brosnan movies and the early Craig movies, and the role that she actually finally has a really great performance part to play in Skyfall. But I think he's been a really great M for the most part.
Yeah, and Bernard Lee is kind of a bland M in the first ones, and then I think there were two in between those. And I can't remember, though, but the kind of main one after that was that one guy who's in all the Roger Moore movies, and he was an alright one. But they're just kind of these bland old men actors that I think Judi Dench is definitively the best M. That's not even a question. But
Ana de Armas was in this as Paloma, who was a CIA agent who helped out Bond a little bit when he was in Cuba. Any thoughts about her?
I love Ana de Armas anyway. I think she's amazing in everything she's in. That was one of the other disappointments, is that she was only barely in this because she was so competent.
Yeah.
So great.
And also was kind of like, she's obviously had all the skills, but kind of had this nervousness, and this like my first mission, and like, that was an interesting dynamic to see play out.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that fits with other Bond movies where they have the Bond, there's multiple Bond girls in each movie or whatever, and, but yeah.
And it also occurred to me as her and Daniel Craig were on screen, like, they're both in Knives Out. I wasn't even thinking about that before this. So, I think, Bond movies, most of the best ones have really great supporting casts, and I think this is no exception. This would be a good chance for us. I don't think we formally ever talked about the Bond franchise on this podcast. We may very well do Bond movies someday on here. I'm not sure when that'll be.
Only certain ones.
Yeah, we're not going to do the whole franchise.
No, that's
Don't worry
ridiculous.
about that. I am someone, I know how annoying this sounds. I'm kind of a purist about this. I'm someone who thinks that really the, quote, true James Bond really was Sean Connery, and that everything after that kind of has the 007 logo slapped on it, and they call it James Bond, but it's not, quote, really James Bond. Now, I say this as someone who actually likes some of the other eras of Bond movies, and so I'm not saying that you can't make good Bond movies, but there's something about that 60s spy classicism of those Connery movies that to me will always be on this mountaintop that all the rest are trying to get to the top of. But to that end, I think Craig has made a pretty excellent Bond overall. Even in Quantum of Solace and Spectre, two horrible movies, he was really good himself in both of them.
He has never been the issue in any of his movies. He's always competent.
Quantum of Solace was a particularly hellish experience for him to make, because that was in the midst of the 07-08 writer's strike, and that he was actually literally acting as a screenwriter on parts of that movie, and that's not a role that he wanted to play.
Which, by the way, this movie had like 3 or 4 screenwriters, and that
instantly made me right at the beginning, I didn't sigh out loud, but internally I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
And what's weird is that this movie felt like it had that many screenwriters, but at the same time was good. So that never happens, but it actually did work.
Exactly.
Enough. But
so in general, what is someone who's seen all the Bond movies? What do you think this movie, but in general the Craig era, added to the mythos of the character, or what? How does this act as a capstone to maybe his whole era as well, for you?
Well, I think. Well, first of all, there's only so many Bond movies that are good, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, because obviously Sean Connery's my favorite Bond, without question. Lazenby, who I call Laser Brain, not a good Bond, but in a good enough but still complicated movie that is one of the most ambitious franchise movies I've ever seen, actually, especially for that time, but actually still didn't totally be what it wanted to be at the same time. Moore is a pretty good Bond. I like him in his own way, but his movies, for the most part, are not good. But he has a few. The Spy Who Loved Me, I think, is by far his best. A lot of people say that. But even that whole movie, but especially the climax, is kind of a You Only Live Twice ripoff. Yeah. But I'm like, hey, that was the best one that had been made since that movie up until that point. So, and then a lot of his movies are pretty bad. I mean, Moonraker is one of the worst things I've seen in general, other than like Die Another Day, which is literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I really like Timothy Dalton. His movies are really good, and that's what I was going to get to, talking about Dalton and Craig. I'm going to kind of talk about together, but he only made 2 movies. I think he looks and acts the part very good. The movies themselves are really pretty good. And then Brosnan, I've always really liked a lot as Bond. His movies aren't very good.
Yeah, his movies because I've seen all the Connery movies except for Diamonds Are Forever, Never Say Never Again. I like the 5 main
Diamonds Are Forever
movies he made.
Not that good, but not that bad either.
And I really haven't seen anything until the Brosnan movie, so that's a huge blind spot for me, is the whole Moore Well,
you have
I've seen
on
I've seen that. I forgot.
Yeah.
And like that, Fine Enough.
Yeah.
I want to rewatch it, but have not seen any of the Moore movies or the Dalton movies. I actually do want to see them at some point. I just haven't yet. Have seen all the Brosnan movies and kind of remember in the culture when those were coming out. That was my first awareness of Bond at all. Was just growing up in the 90s.
That they were going to call it Tomorrow Never Lies, but literally accidentally screwed up and
that for
said
real?
Die. Oh yeah, did you not know that?
I think I heard
it was a typo that Tomorrow Never Dies, so they left it. They were that stupid. That's how stupid of a movie that is. Anyways,
now, I guess it's kind of about the media, so that
yes,
makes
it
sense
is.
to
Yeah,
say
because
that
whole oh my god, that whole movie is like about, it's kind of a halfway interesting idea, but that Jonathan Pryce runs this like really big news conglomerate. And that they are like, I don't remember exactly what it is, but they are like profiting off of crimes somehow,
or
like international
international
terrorism and crimes, and that they're the villains. I have to look this up later if I remember to care.
Tomorrow Never Lies.
But so it was going to be Tomorrow Never Lies, because that was kind of the whole, they're like trademark like motto or whatever, but they accidentally created a typo of Tomorrow Never Dies, and they were like, no, we like that better. And that's why they call it that. That's supposedly the case.
I believe it. Yeah, that's so stupid.
The World Is Not Enough is better than that. Now, we like GoldenEye, we should
Love
say.
GoldenEye,
That's a really pretty good movie. That's like as goofy of that era as Bond can get, that I really love. That I'm like, I think this is exactly what it needs to be.
Right.
World Is Not Enough is not all that good, but isn't all that bad. Die Another Day is garbage, atrocious, awful. I can't think of any other
That was
adjectives.
the first Bond movie I remember seeing in theaters, so I do remember that.
Yeah.
I think it was a big deal when that came out in terms of it was the 40th anniversary of the franchise.
So, with Craig, I think what he has added has been very interesting, because at first I was just going to say, well, it's really great. They're really great action movies because they're newer and whatever, and they look really good, and he's a really good Bond as just like a. But I think what they literally add to the mythos, like you asked, is this idea of questioning in the end, because it's been an up and down, back and forth about what his movies wanted to be, because you had one smack dab in the middle that is arguably, other than Dr. No, or maybe better than Dr. No, the best movie of these, Skyfall. That in the middle of that, you have this really great movie, but it kind of skews everything that's what these movies wanted to say narratively.
And it should be said is the most that doesn't buy into the continuity of
and
these
then
movies.
in Spectre, they tried to tie back that Silva was part of Spectre, and it's like, no, that is stupid. That's honestly maybe one of the dumbest things about that movie, believe it or not, is that it tries to do that, because it's like, you just have no clue what you're doing. But that, so So
I gotta say, I love a good retcon of just like, no, actually it was this. As someone who reads comics a lot, it's just like, no, you're
now,
lying.
and I've seen the movie a couple times, so I remembered him. But the guy Green, that was like the villain in Quantum of Solace, that guy that was in like Diving Bell and the Butterfly or whatever his name. I don't remember that guy's name, but anyway, he's like the villain in that movie.
He's in Wes Anderson movies.
Yeah, right. That it's like, oh, his picture is Inspector, and it's like a lot of people are like, who the heck is that? And I remembered who he was, but But anyways, so all in all, what that story tells, though, from the very first scene of Bond in Casino Royale to the very last scene, is this, obviously, I mean, it's a weird thing, but I'm a ELA teacher now, so is character development. That you have him from being this cold-hearted killer, that's all he is. Because, like, that first scene where he's killing that guy in, like, the Czech Republic or whatever. Yeah. And he's, like, and that's, like, showing that scene where he's fighting that guy in that bathroom, and it's, like, really bloody and gritty and violent. Yeah. To go from that, and then even in that movie, that's a very meaty movie, character-wise, of that it's actually saying, like, oh, and then he falls in love with this Vesper woman, and then she dies, and he quotes the very famous line at the end of the book too, the blank is dead, or whatever, and that he's acting like, oh, I don't care. But then all these movies and even into Quantum of Solace, the very end of that movie, is all ultimately leading up to the idea of, oh no, he really actually does care about this stuff. Yeah. But that he's just, kind of keeping it inside. But so it finally got to this movie where it's definitively saying, okay, he actually does have this new family, he does care. Yeah, and that has to be taken away from him, but that he does choose in the end, okay, I am going to sacrifice myself to do this. I think ultimately that adds this whole nuance to the character that was interesting in the sense of Timothy Dalton's tenure, that he was very much that kind of cold, calculated killer, like a lot of people said he was a lot more like the literary Bond. Yeah. Which of what I've read of those, I'd say is true. Yeah. But in the end, he pretty much stayed that, but he, at least in that second movie, was like, I want to go on this murderous revenge for this friend of mine. Mm-hmm. Which is a very interesting and complex movie in the sense that it's like, okay, you are killing off these bad guys, but you're kind of doing it in this very personal manner that is kind of like, should you even be doing that, and the movie's called License to Kill, so it's kind of even seems like it's questioning that in itself. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting movie, but that level of nuance I don't think has been brought to Bond since that. Yeah. And I think that finally, and even maybe in certain ways as far back as Laserbrain and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I do always call him Laserbrain. But, so therefore, I think that's what Craig has brought to this, and I think his personality and kind of his personage that he has brought to the Bond character naturally feeds on that and is apt for that kind of idea. And I don't think that was all intended from the very beginning, because as we've seen, these movies have been all over the place. These 5 movies, I mean. Well, that's one of the hallmarks of the Bond franchises. There's usually not a guiding director or writer that's doing this. It's just the Broccoli family, and it's like and the Bond himself, whoever that is, kind of guiding the direction. And it should be said too, we forget, Casino Royale came in the wake of Batman Begins, and there was that whole era of oh, we're gonna reboot these franchises, but do them quote more dark and gritty. That's what all of the Marvel movies ultimately were in its own way too, with doing Iron Man and and even in a sense the Amazing Spider-Man did that. Yeah, I would say the Marvel movies are weird because in some ways they're like a little reaction against that, to do something a little more bright and colorful. But rebooting things is rather what I mean. Yes, and I think the Amazing Spider-Man movies are actually very much a version of an attempt to try to do that same Batman, James Bond thing with Spider-Man. Yes. Yeah, that wasn't, you're right. That wasn't as much the case of the Marvel movies. I just meant more about, let's just reboot these characters and do this thing. And, but now we're coming at the conclusion in many ways of that era, that this is the end of that era that's lasted for about 15 years now. And that's hard to believe that's lasted that long. Yeah, and there's only been that many movies. It did, again, it gives, I think, Craig's character the proper send-off, and is a really pretty great conclusion for his character in terms of
not the whole movie exactly, but like what its ending and his place in it is. So overall, his tenure, I think, ended up being a successful one. Even if this one was not all that good, even if it was mediocre, if it was like bad, then that might have called the movies into question more. But even if it being like, even if it was like mediocre, again, Casino Royale and Skyfall are two of the heights of the franchise, and I think that alone would be enough to kind of say, well, his tenure was overall a good one. But this being pretty good puts it all in a new conversation of now making us, as casual fans of it, go, oh, I guess I'm going to have to rewatch Quantum of Solace and Spectre just to fill in some of the blanks. And, like, doesn't mean I'm going to like them, but, like, that just to remember, frankly, some of the plot points of this. But don't worry, this franchise will not go away. It will continue into perpetuity. Any thoughts or ideas, both in broad or specific ways, about what the Bond future should hold from you as a perspective? I know a name that we had thrown around as one that we think would be a good next Bond is Dev Patel.
I think that's one everybody would be pleased with.
Well, people are very much like, ready for Bond to be a person of color. There's even questions not whether a woman could get that role. Craig himself had even came out recently and said that women should aspire to have greater roles than Bond, which is yet another little slash of the wrist by him on this part and on this character. I think that's him obviously not speaking ill of a woman playing this part. And more like, well, women should deserve better parts than to play Bond, basically. But again, if even if we got like spin-off films with Lashana Lynch's character as Nomi, that would be interesting. But I also don't want to see this become the Marvel franchise either, where there's all these spin-offs and all these things. So like we said, I think we thought Dev Patel would be a good person to step up and play this role. But
I don't I don't really know what it should do next. I mean, because I would like to see it a little more scaled down, for one.
That'll happen for a while, probably.
And then it'll get big. And that's fine. I mean, it has to have that, I think, because that's what's always interesting about these movies is that sense of scaled down, and then it gets big again, and then it's, it just goes on and on. That's fine. But I don't really know. I mean, because I would like to see some more character-driven, different types of Bond stuff. Because it's interesting to note that this movie and Skyfall both are pretty similar, and that they're not a lot of the typical Bond hallmarks aren't there in full force. And they're a little more, it's weird to call this movie scaled down, but that it has so much plot going on. It isn't doing as much of, he gets to this new hotel, he does all these very basic things that a lot of Bond movies do. This one doesn't necessarily do that as much.
True.
And I mean, obviously it has the big opening in Italy, but you remember how the movie starts, where it's like the flashback stuff, and it was like, that is one of the weirdest random openings to a Bond movie, as far as like it's just really scaled that back and down to a point that I found very surprising. So, because Spectre even was not that. It very much was, this is a Bond movie, and it does a lot of those things. It's just not as good. So clearly this is a Bond movie. It has the gadgets. It does all these little things, but it just felt...
As a mega watch.
Yeah. It just felt very different, which I liked about it, but that doesn't always mean you walk away as pleased with it either. So, as some other ones. Like, it wasn't a definitive Bond movie exactly compared to what it could be. But, so, I don't know what they should do.
Another kind of last thing to say on this, what do we think of... I feel like Daniel Craig, out of any Bond I can think of, had the most fruitful non-Bond films during his time as Bond than any other Bond I can think of. Because during this time, he made Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, he made Knives Out, Cowboys and Aliens, you may remember that? No, but I mean, he certainly hasn't been able to maybe make as many movies as he would have liked, but I mean, he has made some still memorable things outside of just this franchise. I would say he had a little bit more choice maybe in the matter than past ones did. But honestly, one of the most iconic moments of Daniel Craig in recent years was when he hosted SNL some time ago and very famously told us, ladies and gentlemen, The Weekend, which has now since become, kind of a meme all over the internet. And very interestingly has sparked a whole you go on Twitter like every Friday or Saturday, and you see this, like, ladies and gentlemen, the weekend come up all the time.
Yeah.
Him doing that. And it actually prompted, we just want to briefly talk about this. We won't spend too long on this, I don't think. This Twitter account called SNL Hosts Introducing the Musical Guest, which is a collection.
Who's
There's
their
actually
profile pic there? I can't see.
John Lovitz.
Oh, John Lovitz. Okay.
Which is literally, there's not even that many actually right now, just of random people of SNL's past announcing the musical guests, and some of the random surprises that are in this. Of the things that you find, because they're great little time capsules in their own way of, you know, just who the celebrities were at the time, but also who the musical guests, just to play you some of these. That Sean Penn. So Sean Penn announcing LL Cool J to us. Here's John McCain, I think, in the midst of the 2008 presidential election.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the White Stripes. Ladies and gentlemen.
There's some other ones I just want to mention here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the replacement.
By the way, that's Harry Dean Stanton, if you couldn't tell the replacements,
Here's another.
The Smashing Pumpkins.
You all know who that is.
This one's a little on the longer side, but it is still funny. It features Richard Dreyfuss.
Ladies and gentlemen, my next guest broke his leg a couple of weeks ago, and he still managed to get here to do the show. Will you please...
He's looking around.
Uh-oh. What's going on? Where's the shark?
Did you hear anything? Nah. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Buffett.
The shockingness of, oh, by the way, Jimmy Buffett. Here's Christopher Walken.
Ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
Here's another one. There's our homie from way back, Michael McDowell.
Television are Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band.
Captain Beefheart played on SNL, which is hard to imagine. Here's a very, very interesting one from one Sam Kinison. It should be said, dressed in what you can tell has been Marlon Brando as Jor-El skit. Here we go.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, because I know you haven't had enough, another dose of Lou Reed.
This maniac.
Yeah, we were talking about Sam Kinison this weekend, about that he actually used to be a Presbyterian minister or something.
No,
not Presbyterian. Pentecostal. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but as I can believe that. So yeah.
But wow, just not a dose of Lou Reed. I mean, wow. Okay. This one's shocking.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pink.
And some of these, the more shocking thing is, wait a minute, Al Sharpton hosted SNL.
Yeah.
What happened there? Where they had to, he was hosting. Anyways, but the one that's got the most attention, it should be said, has been Adrian Brody. I'm not even going to say anything more about this. We're just going to play it, and then we can talk about it here. Let me find
I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, but...
Jamaica, man, Rastafari, you got the whole family in the house, me got Sean Peter, you got Sean Paul, you got Sean Mary, you got Sean John, we all in the house now, man. Respect, all aspect, me respect, me expect, me respect, me respect, we got a great show, in Kingston, massive, but, man. We got the whole crew now, And I give a big up, enough respect, and dancehall players, And like Sean John!
So, Adrian Brody, somehow his career didn't end the next day. What's he thinking when doing that?
I don't know. Think? I've never been that big of an Adrian Brody fan anyways. I'll go ahead and say...
You'd love his turn in King Kong?
No. It's quite... It leaves you just speechless. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just... wow.
Yeah. I'm surprised that his career didn't end as a result of that. And also, quite hilariously, the for this page on Twitter, the cover photo they have
is him. Yeah.
from that.
Right.
What's your general thoughts on just this page's existence and what joys?
Well,
or
I mean, you know, like. You know, it fits into like a aspect of Twitter and social media that I find annoying. Of like, look at this weird thing. Look how weird it is. Like, now it's not as annoying as like people making those like pound cakes out of like bologna and mustard. You know, that type of stuff that people think is funny for some reason. Or like putting sausage, like a sausage link in a blender or whatever people do and laugh. Oh, look how weird this is, so nasty. It's not that version of that, but like there's just something that internet humor that is like, ooh, these two weird things colliding, like that I find kind of annoying. But then you find stuff like Lou Reed, I mean, which is just like, I'll never not remember that existed now. But I guess it just fits. It has to fit my sense of humor, or it's out.
No, I do
I mean?
agree that those things do generally get on my nerves. But just the pure randomness of some of these cultural things slamming against
like having to think that Christopher Walken would know the Foo Fighters. Like, you know, is kind of funny. But like Sam Kinison would be into Lou Reed. Like that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Al Sharpton being into Pink. I mean,
Ladies and gentlemen, Pink. So it's just one of those random little things. Feel free to look them up. There's actually not all that many that have been put out there. And if nothing else, and we're no huge SNL fans, just speaks to the power of the institution that has just been around that long.
Yeah.
And has just encompassed so many people. Whether or not you think the show's good or not, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But just like how long it's been around and how present it's been in the culture, so to speak. All right, so from the horrors of Adrian Brody to the horrors of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. So, Levi, give us the rundown on this. Now, the cast is mostly, I guess, a non-professional cast, or was like basically actors who didn't really have much experience before or since, but we'll talk about them.
So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, by the way, chainsaw split up into two words. I find that kind of interesting. Not on the poster, but in general. It's a 1974 American horror film produced and directed by Tobe Hooper from a story and screenplay by Hooper and Kim Hinkle. And basically, I'll read what it says here. The film follows a group of friends who fall victim to a family of cannibals while on their way to visit an old homestead. It says the film was marketed as being based on true events to attract a wider audience and to act as a subtle commentary on the era's political climate. Although the character of Leatherface and minor story details were inspired by the crimes of murderer Ed Gein, its plot is largely fictional. But yeah, basically the movie's about these... well, it's weird. I can't remember. I always forget this about the movie. It's either that they are just going to try and find this kind of group of young... They're not teenagers, but like young adults.
Early 20s.
Yeah, maybe. Like going to find one of theirs... like, I guess it's the Sally and Franklin, who are like brother and sister. They're like grandparents' or parents' old farmhouse out in the middle of like rural Texas somewhere. And that while they're out there around that same time, there's been these like grave robberies that have been happening nearby. And they were kind of worried that maybe their loved ones had been dug up and taken away. I don't think that they had been, or they might not even find the graves. I don't remember because there's a bunch of people there looking. But basically, so they're on the... I can't remember, like I said, if they go there just to look about that or they're going there anyway and they happen to. But they go to the farmhouse and basically run across this other farmhouse where these bunch of weirdos live. And they've run into a couple of them before in the movie. But basically they fall prey to them and... most of them are killed by these crazy people. One of them is Leatherface because he wears a mask made of human skin.
Fun stuff.
Yeah. So, I guess we'll go through the cast next. So, yeah, like I said, most of these are all, you know...
I think the most famous one's probably Gunnar Hansen,
right?
Just because purely for playing Leatherface.
But Marilyn Burns is Sally Hardesty. She rightfully has gotten a lot of credit for this movie because she has to do so much screaming and, you know... I know a lot of people... I think there's a lot of people who are annoyed by her in the movie, but, like, clearly, that's the point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't really get that.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, she's really good. I think she's been in some other kind of movie. Yeah, she was in Brewster McCloud, because I think we talked about that at some point, which, of course, that movie was made in Texas.
Right.
But she was like barely in that. But yeah, she's been in some other movies here and there.
They've been just a few years before.
Not as many. I'm not able to pull this stuff up because it looks like the Wi-Fi is kind of wonky right now. Paul A. Partain as Franklin Hardesty. He's like her brother who's in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it should be said now, we can kind of talk about this later, this movie was a really troubled production, as you would guess. It was shot in Texas during the summer of 1973, and it was so hot that they supposedly had some people passed out and had heat stroke, and it was just a really grueling movie to make, which I think is strangely obviously fits the movie.
Right.
But that tempers were high, people didn't really get along. But the reason I bring that up is that Paul A. Partain, I've seen in an interview before talking about the movie, that he said that they were so frustrated because they weren't getting paid money yet either, like definitive money.
That's very much the case with a lot of independent productions.
And that he complained and complained and complained to the point where they finally gave him a paycheck. And that famous moment in the movie where that truck goes by towards the beginning and they his wheelchair goes down the hill and he falls out of it, that he had his check in his pocket. Like he was so he was so happy to have it, he kept it on his person or whatever, so it could have fallen out or whatever. But anyway, I think he's good in the movie. He's rightfully annoying, definitively annoying. And he's knows quite a bit about his family's history and kind of talks about that here and there, but he's kind of the only one who really knows very much about it. I think he was the only one that really remembered living there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so anyway. William Vale as Kirk. I think that's the guy who's kind of driving the van. Somebody compared him when we were reading this stuff to a real Fred and Scooby-Doo kind of thing. This whole thing kind of has a Scooby-Doo...
rated R Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, in some ways it could have been rated X Scooby-Doo. Yeah. By the way... we can talk about that later, about it maybe getting a PG rating is what they were originally hoping, which is just hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, he's just, a guy who gets hit in the head with a sledgehammer.
Doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so we said.
His is kind of the first death.
Doesn't mean God didn't love him.
Yeah. His was the first death in the movie, which is really gruesome. Obviously, a lot of deaths in this are gruesome.
Yeah.
Alan Danziger is Jerry. He's that guy that, has the, hair and the glasses. He looks like Hyde from that 70s show.
Yeah.
He gets killed too. I don't know. Terry McGinn is Pam. She has a lot that she has to do in the movie as far as she goes in there. There's actually that, we can talk more about this later, but one of her scenes we watched in kind of one of the most famous scenes in the movies, where she finds that room full of all the bones, and that we talked about that in film school. I'll kind of talk about that while we're watching that in the moment. Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface. I say this, I don't say this lightly. I think it's one of the most, if not the most impressive slasher movie performances. It probably just is the best.
Yeah.
But that he, I think, spent a lot of time with some, I guess, what would you say, mentally handicapped people to kind of get in this kind of headspace to play this role. A very this whole movie's very disturbing, but I think what makes it so disturbing is his performance.
Right. And not only just purely the leather face mask, which is disturbing in of itself, but also his body language and movement is very memorable and very disturbing.
Yeah. And I mean, it feels like somebody who, and we can talk about the themes of this movie later, about what has happened to these people, both literally and figuratively, over time. But that feels like somebody who, worked in a slaughterhouse and got laid off and doesn't have anything better to do than to, be like that, I guess. And he's basically a mute. He doesn't really say anything definitively. He just squeals and screams. And I think that's what I remember most about this movie. There's certain points in it that I remember more about the way he sounds than the way he looks, which says something about the movie that is very disturbing.
Definitely.
So he's obviously, I think, the best slasher performance I can think of, because even somebody like Robert Englund in as Freddy Krueger, I think is very good, but for that, even that though, it's a very vocal performance. For these very silent performances, I think that he
you think this is even better than Michael Myers, you would say, even too.
Well, and so many people have played him that it's kind of like a faceless entity in a way. Another performance though, and we can talk about this movie later because it's kind of part of this movie in a lot of ways, is Black Christmas. I think that whoever plays the killer in that, who's never really definitively seen, I think is another one that is really great. Kind of in the same way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But anyway, Edwin...
And one thing I want to ask, too, about Leatherface is, was Leatherface, like, the first kind of, not only slasher villain, but, like, villain with a, quote, mask or very discernible, like, almost marketable, memorable features or, like, cadence that way?
Well, that's complicated because a lot of people talk about this stuff because they're sick in the head and they don't have anything better to do. Is talk about what was the first real slasher, which I mean, that's not really sick in the head to talk about that. But, people have argued over this forever. Yeah. In my opinion, yes, on that level.
Wasn't Norman Bates of a sort
Well,
qualify?
I would say that kind of would be too, yes, because he's wearing like a woman outfit and is very much that kind of thing. But I think, yes, for the most part, this is kind of that. Because even Black Christmas, which came out within a week or 2 weeks of this movie in Canada, doesn't...
that movie didn't have a cult success, but this was a huge success.
That movie even doesn't show the killer in it definitively, and there's no face to even hide because he's seen kind of here and there. But yeah, so even that doesn't have that. But, I'd say vaguely, for the most part, yes, this would be the first.
Because this was something that even people who maybe didn't see the movie saw the poster and kind of sort of saw what that looked like.
Right.
And then a few years later with Halloween, and then that got the ball even more rolling in terms of these horror movie villains with these very distinctive, iconic... Well, you could even go back, though, and even mention very briefly the Universal monsters decades before in terms of these very... horrific looking faces or the images of those making themselves
and even the Phantom of the Opera you could go back as far.
Sure.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. Yeah, I would say for the most part yes about this. By the way, I don't know if you've seen the trailer for this movie before, but we're going to play it later.
I haven't yet. No.
It's kind of an infamous trailer. I want to make sure we find the right one because I think it was almost as infamous as the movie because a lot of people saw the trailer that didn't see the movie. And it was it's a very grindhouse trailer, and it's pretty in your face, very loud and robust trailer. But that's the other thing you said that a lot of people saw that and kind of knew that, and then by way of the trailer, that was another thing too that people even saw the trailer and were like, "Wow, this movie is something else,"
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so therefore, I would say vaguely, I think that that's the case, with this movie.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't know that definitively.
Well, I know again, if that's something people are going to bicker with us on, then we can just move on from that. I know really that's care. A debatable thing. I know.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Edwin Neal is the hitchhiker. We just picked up Dracula. He is the titular Dracula in that moment. What a creepy person.
Yeah.
Just wow. I mean, what do you think about that guy's performance?
Yeah, he's very odd looking, and he's
got like a birthmark on his face.
And it just looks like he's a freak and comes from a freakish background.
Yeah.
Memorable.
Here's what he looks like.
Yeah.
Later on in life. Jim Seedow is the cook. He's like the guy that's out by the barbecue stand, and we can kind of talk about that barbecue stand later about what maybe that implies. It's very obvious, but that at the beginning of the movie, and this is a trope that's very famous now, where you have the old guy, and it's like, oh, y'all shouldn't be going and looking around there, but then it turns out he is part of that family or whatever. So, I think he has maybe one of the best performances in the movie because he isn't as outwardly insane and as much of a psychopath as the other two are.
Yeah.
Of Leatherface and the Hitchhiker, but in a lot of ways is even worse because he hides behind this like, oh, I'm just a nice old man.
Right.
Because in the kind of the climax of the movie, he's just kind of shrugging and saying, this is just what has to be done, and just like, you're just going to have to put up with it. And that I find that to be even more frightening in a lot of ways than the freaks that are at the front and center of the movie,
Most definitely. Yeah.
But he's really good. John Dugan is Grandpa Sawyer. I think that's by far the weirdest thing about the movie is that he's like the patriarch that's like up in the attic and is like barely alive, basically, and like that says a lot of things that are very strange. And we're going to talk about this when we talk about the movie in a few moments. In general, that just adds to the bleak, sick quality of this movie that I think is what draws people to it. Is this the atmosphere of it that we can kind of talk about later, but. And lastly, John Larroquette, as the narrator at the very beginning of the movie.
I think I'd heard him tell this story a while back, and I can't remember some of the details, that he kind of in the early 70s, had a chance meeting with Tobe Hooper, and he just got to know him on this friendly, personal level that had nothing to do with making movies or anything.
Right. Yeah.
And that, like, sometime into their friendship, he was kind of like, oh, like, I'm doing this movie. I wonder if you could provide some narration for me for it. And he's like, okay, sure, whatever. And did it and said at the time he didn't think the movie was going to be anything.
Yeah,
he was kind of heard about what it was and was like, okay, this isn't going to probably amount to much, but I'll help a buddy out. And I don't think they really maintained their friendship over the years. Not that anything bad happened. They just kind of drifted apart. But John Larroquette, who we were quite fond of, happened to narrate the opening of this movie. Is another random aspect of it. He's probably the biggest name attached to this movie on the cast level.
Which is weird because he kind of came onto it later, and that's all. And it's not like he narrates the whole movie. He only narrates the beginning of the movie, and then it's over, and it's like it moves on.
Yeah, I guess there's an attempt on that part to add to this docu quality of it.
Yeah,
and this kind of ripped from the headlines feel of doing that.
Right.
Didn't you say the inspiration for this was Ed Gein?
Yes, who is
wasn't it also the inspiration for Psycho?
Yeah, that and later portions of Silence of the Lambs, which itself was based on a novel. But yes, serial killer, did all kinds of obviously sick and weird things. Look into that at your own risk. But a lot of the kind of stuff about keeping the skulls and bodies of people was primarily fueled by what was heard about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that just adds to the whole exploitation-y nature of this rip from the headlines feel that this movie takes part in. And just be a chance for us to talk a little bit more about exploitation filmmaking in general. Yeah. Of course, I feel like the 70s was the golden era of exploitation filmmaking. I know for me, exploitation or grindhouse kind of B pictures like this, to me, weirdly always work much better in a historical context than they do in a moment they're coming out context, because there's all kinds of exploitation movies that are so low rent that they don't even get shown in theaters today. They're direct to video or direct to streaming or whatever. And for whatever reason, I'm just instantly don't care about most of those movies. But if something's exploitation-y in a historical context, I'm more drawn to it because it gives me at least a little bit of perspective into the world in which it was produced in.
Yeah.
How does maybe the exploitation horror of this to you compare to maybe more traditional studio-driven horror of this time period? One of the biggest ones that jumps out to me is The Exorcist, and that was obviously, a huge hit, made a lot of money, was nominated for Academy Awards. And for a horror movie, that in and of itself was a big deal. That even happened. But it is more of a traditional,
it is.
like studio horror movie. Has more of a literary import to it. And don't get me wrong, The Exorcist is an awesome movie, so I'm not saying it isn't. But this is different. It kind of has this kind of more. It's not found footage, but it has this more like grimy found footagey quality that studio horror movies do.
I've heard that guy. Is it Mark Borchardt? That's the guy in American Movie.
I think so.
I think I've heard a quote before from him that he said it looks like something you'd watch in science class. It's like this very it feels like a documentary in a lot of ways, and we can talk about how actually strangely beautiful the movie looks, literally, but it's very colorful. But yeah, so in that sense, yes. To get back to your question, I think that and I really do love The Exorcist, but there's no question this is better than that in my mind. But I think why is that what is great about The Exorcist is that it is kind of a drama. That's what's weird about it, is that even though it is a horror movie, it has these aspirations to be this like family drama. And like you could easily take that movie and make it about a drug addiction. And it could be the same movie literally. Other than the ending, the climax would be totally different. But the most of the movie is like, about a physical possession by something, and it doesn't matter what it is, narratively it would work the same ultimately. Which is a weird thing to say because it's definitively supernatural movie. But and part of me wants to gravitate more towards that movie as a religious person myself, but I also have some very minor issues with what that movie actually says about religion that I won't go into now, that as a believer I don't agree with, and I feel like sells short religion in a lot of ways that are very specific. Which is weird because the writer himself, William Peter Blatty, I believe was a Catholic. William Friedkin was not. And I don't know if you know this, but John Landis is an atheist, but every time he sees The Exorcist, he believes.
Just for context, if you go watch an interview with Landis talking about horror movies, he always brings up The Exorcist, and always brings up the fact that I'm not an athist, but when I watch that movie, I totally believe everything. We joke about that all the time. Ourselves.
Anyways,
he tells that story over and over again.
Yeah, but so in that sense, it's about a lot of things that are very important. But at the same time, as a horror movie, and I've always seen that movie. I know it was a really big deal when it came, obviously. Like, it was the scariest movie ever made or whatever. And a lot of people still say that. I've never been particularly scared by that movie, which is strange.
I'm disturbed by it, I guess.
And I'm not saying it's like, oh, I enjoy watching that. It is all fun to see people's heads turn around. No, I'm not saying that. But, like, I've never been frightened by it like other people are. And I'm frightened by a lot of movies, believe me. But that movie I've never had trouble with, which is strange because I find that to be the most realistic more than other movies in the sense that I believe that such things could be possible. Now, do I believe that demonic possession is something that happens every day? No. Do I believe that a lot of that stuff gets mistaken for mental health issues? Yes, but I believe such things are possible, which is strange because then I therefore am not as frightened of it because I'm like, oh, well, okay, I believe in God and Jesus, and so I guess other people have more problems with that if they don't believe in it. That frightens them in some way. It does not. So I'm just saying maybe that's why that movie doesn't scare me. I don't know. But anyway, this movie, though, it doesn't scare me, but it is so in your face, dirty, grimy, sweaty, and like a rabid animal. It is like after you at and it's a very short movie. It's 83 minutes. Once it gets going, it's gone, and it's like a constant, throbbing, pulsing movie that makes you writhe and feel uncomfortable in ways that I hesitate to admit I enjoy, but it's like it's the type of horror movie that I get why people love horror movies as much as they do if this is what they feel. And it's not a pleasant experience exactly, but once you're done with it, you're like, wow, I got through that. And, in that sense, it's an adrenaline-filled movie that most literary horror movies like this are Silence of the Lambs, and I hesitate to even call that a horror movie for the most part. But it is, I think, in certain ways. But that this, being an exploitation movie, therefore, to answer your question finally, is... it uses the exploitation format to elevate that while also being about a lot of things that we'll talk about in the themes part of this. But that I think, and I guess we can talk about the atmosphere of the movie, I guess, along with that.
Well, at that point, too, I also want to jump off on something you're saying.
Into that.
Is that, like, coming after what we talked about last week with Funny Games, is that movie, for its various effectiveness and ineffectiveness, is studied. It's very like trying to put the cart before the horse in some ways, and is trying to belittle one for in any way liking what horror movies are supposed to do, which is make you want to see bad things happen, but to kind of see these people get away. And in many ways, this is almost like the very type of movie in some ways that it is. This is the type of movie that's decrying in many ways. In terms of, you jump into a movie for a while, you have a good time, but by the end, she gets in the truck, she gets away, and she might be soaked in blood, but she's laughing just if nothing else for the pure adrenaline rush that she survived. And again, with Funny Games, what we talked about last week was, well, this much more studied, frankly pretentious view of what this is in terms of belittling you for that. And this is just trying to take you on this big ride, this whirlwind ride that doesn't have a lot of spare moments of quiet reflection in the same way that even Funny Games does here and there.
Which is what I feel like, and we're going to talk about this later, I guess, about the realism, but is what this experience would really be. There's no time to stop and think. It just goes on and on.
Talk to the camera.
And the horror continues, and it's incessant.
And that's something that, in general, like exploitation movies, they're bread and butter in terms of that intensity, that grittiness, that in-your-faceness quality. That I think there's a reason why this isn't even necessarily seen as a, quote, exploitation movie, I think, by some, because it in some ways transcends what most exploitation movies are.
Yeah.
This is one of the heights of the genre, or the medium, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's kind of seen as a genuine genre masterpiece in ways that plenty of other junk isn't necessarily held in that regard in the same way. And another big talking point about this, and something that exploitation movies in general try to thrive on, and I think sometimes pay more lip service to than actually are, is the politics of this movie. When it came out, of course, was in 1974. That was in the waning years of the Vietnam War. This movie gets a lot of comparisons to being, quote, about Vietnam in some roundabout way. I think I saw somewhere that it's a kind of, quote, reflective of Watergate, the era of Watergate. I frankly do not see the connections that could be made there between that. I think those are a little more obscure to me, and I don't quite see that. But that general sense of violence and terror that punctuated so much of the mid-'60s through the early to mid-'70s, I think is very much present in this movie. Yeah. And how do you think this functions as kind of a highlight or a showcase of the politics of the era?
I think it's a more complex version of these things, but as far as it being about Vietnam, I think I've heard people say that the kids are like, young American servicemen, and that the killers are like the Viet Cong or whatever, which, I get it, sure. But I think it functions far more in a cultural sense of the kind of letdown of the working class, and those parts of the country we like to forget about. Of course, the conservative America at the time was supposed to have promoted a lot of these types of people.
The silent majority.
Right, but it did not. And I think that's part of what the point is. Specifically also at this time, to think about it this way, there was a lot of this kind of stuff going on of the West Virginia coal fields and stuff at the time, and that's kind of continued into today, but how it ravaged the natural world, and it ravaged the economy and the cultural centers of that. And those people were impoverished, and this was something that they were trying to deal with in the War on Poverty. Robert Kennedy tried to go there and kind of deal with it. I think John F. Kennedy might have tried to go there and deal with it. I mean,
Lyndon Johnson, that was part of his big
right,
Great
and
Society
so, but
push,
then therefore that wasn't something that Nixon was ever all that interested in either. So I know this is in Texas, but I see there's some parts of that these people waited and waited for this sort of deliverance, and it never came. Even with Nixon, didn't even try to deal with things like that. He was far more foreign policy oriented. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what that results in is this backwatered, forsaken, misbegottenness of rural America. They also saw a sort of version of this in obviously another big inspiration for this movie was the Manson murders, and the kind of fanaticism and cultism that happened there.
I think what's interesting is a counterpoint to that, and I think that's totally valid, is that a difference between this and the Manson murders is that this is a horror that could long be ignored but is stumbled upon, as opposed to being assaultive and coming into your home.
Yes, right. This is different.
I think that's an interesting I think there definitely is inspiration in the Manson murders, but I think in some ways what's scary about this movie is that this easily is a place that these people could have avoided.
Yeah.
But they happen to stumble upon, and then what happens, and that their whole lives could have continued to exist had they not even decided to go and seek out this place.
Right.
But it's being sought out ends up inviting these horrors on these people.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as I think the biggest theme in the movie, and this is one that definitively Tobe Hooper is admitted to, is that it's a lot about veganism and or capitalism also in general, that it's questioning the sense of these people working in a slaughterhouse and then being laid off. So now it's almost like they get their kicks out of that from killing literal human beings and eating them, and also just comparing the idea of killing animals to killing human beings. With, you know, and I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian or anything by trade, but that is a powerful statement in itself that I'm interested in. That the likes of another vegan like Rob Zombie, who we'll bring up again a little bit, tried to kind of do with specifically the Halloween films that he made.
Well, even a little bit in House of a Thousand Corpses. And,
and that also, yes, but specifically those movies really made a point of like doing that. But so in that sense, I think it works most on this sense of economic, cultural desolation, and I think like I said, the atmosphere goes with that so well. Of everything looks so bleak and so dirty, and natural. This kind of natural decay in the center of America in a lot of ways, in Texas, and so therefore I think that's ultimately what the movie's about, is those things more, and these more kind of basic political truths than like these very specific Vietnam War or
I would
like
agree.
Watergate
I think
truths,
it's like really, again, it's imbued. Maybe I think that's the bigger, wider cultural political point it's trying to make, what you said. But I guess just some of the familiarity with horrific images that Vietnam produced that is reflected in this movie, and that really from even before this you can point to some moments, but really from JFK's assassination onward in the 60s, this like familiarity with graphic gruesome images, and graphic gruesome images becoming more and more present in the culture and more accepted. I think this movie is in and of itself a product of and a reflection of that kind of idea. And again, as we said, the 70s was really seen as the birth of the slasher movie genre, which the 80s kind of took and went to whole other levels in terms of volume. Yeah. But I mean, with the 70s, you mentioned earlier Black Christmas, you've got this, you've got Halloween.
Last House on the Left had kind of come a little before this too, and also Hills Have Eyes.
What do you think about the slasher genre has just made it be one of the more present, reproducible forms of horror cinema?
Because I think it said it's the most base level of what a horror movie is that you have killers killing people. And I think that's what, like you said, in certain ways, that's what Funny Games was talking about. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of what this movie's talking about too, while being that, is not only going beyond the idea of killing cattle and human cattle, but also just like being an exploitation movie by trade, saying, okay, this is what you came here for, to quote Dire Straits. But anyway, one of my favorite bands, so you always got to get them in there. But it's very much in your face of saying, this is what you want, here it is, and I think that in that sense, those movies are at their base level. That's what people want to see, so therefore that's what it is. And like I said, in that sense, this movie's almost already doing that ahead of its time. But then in a sense, though, I think they're some of the easiest movies to produce. You get one person, you put them in a mask and an outfit, and they run around and kill people. Yeah. And it has a formula to it that is easy to follow, obviously, that Scream would also parody. Yeah. And kind of satirize. But, so yeah, I guess that's an answer on those. That's what people want to see.
I think for me, part of it is obviously the 70s was also the golden age of the serial killers. I mean, all the serial killers that came out of the 70s. And I think that in of itself invited so much imagination and kind of, at that point, as scary as it all was, it was very clear a human being. There was no, like, supernatural element to any of that stuff, really. And so horror movies themselves, which some have worked in the tradition of being supernatural or otherworldly or whatever, the slasher being a product of the 70s isn't all that much of a surprise when you consider not only the Manson murders at the end of the 60s, but all the other serial killings of the 70s.
Well, and Zodiac having inspired Dirty Harry in its own way too, and the Zodiac killer and all the other serial killers
too,
of
just
the 70s.
slasher. Slasher implies a knife in one's hand.
Yeah.
And this, it's just so much scarier of someone plunging this blunt object into someone's body over and over again, and the personalness of this and the horror of that. And also the adrenaline ride of watching someone try to escape that or get grabbed by that. I think that's just, for the horror genre, it's one of those things now, it's passe and it's been done to death. But at that particular moment, felt novel and it felt exciting and it felt reflective of what was going on in the culture in a way that perhaps previous periods of horror did not.
Yeah, and I think, I agree. I was just going to say, to get back to part of the atmosphere of the movie you mentioned, I want to mention the score of the movie, which is by Tobe Hooper and Wayne Bell. Interestingly, around this time, a lot of directors were making their own music for their movies. I mean, John Carpenter did that. But I guess that's one of those things they're like, well, we'll just do it because we don't have the money. So
that's probably part of the independent aspect.
But I think that's what works about this movie is it's got this like clanging industrial sound to it that is very memorable and it's got this like squealing nature to it. That another thing that I think makes this movie so memorable is there actually isn't a chainsaw in the movie as much as you would think.
Yeah.
But when it's there, it's constantly running and it's like its own scream of a sound that is so persistent. And we'll talk about it later in the movie. I think this has by far the best chase scene in any movie. I think about it all the time of it's so adrenaline filled, and honestly adding a chainsaw sound to that just does that to it, I think, because it gives it this propulsiveness and that about itself of that other movies don't have, the other slasher movies, I guess.
Well, it's
very easy. It's like you just take a very basic tool of life of that thing and put it in there, and it immediately adds this whole other soundscape to the movie that elevates it.
Yeah, I mean, previously the chainsaw was primarily associated with sometimes a great notion. So to kind of reverse the fortunes of the invention, it was something different.
Right.
And to that end, I mean, this movie has such a gargantuan reputation, both years later and then even at the time. It was a highly controversial movie. We read Roger Ebert's review, which he gave 2 out of 4 stars.
Yeah.
And he basically praised the effectiveness of it, but more so questioned the worth of it being produced in the first place. Again, so it's one of those movies that I think still remains controversial for some, even though, as we'll watch it and we'll talk about, it's not nearly as bloody as the reputation would suggest that it is, which means, okay, why do people think that? Well, I think the filmmaking is so good that it makes you and invites the mind to sometimes take worse leaps of logic than is even there, similar to what we talked about last week with Funny Games also did, where that's not quite as violent as you remember it to be, but it just, a lot of stuff happens maybe off of the frame, and you imagine the things being
and there's, and like I said, this movie want to get a PG rating. Okay.
I wonder why they were trying to think like, well, we're not actually showing some of this gory, vulgar stuff, so not as bad. But that's not how the MPAA works.
Well, I mean, you think about, there's 2 scenes in the movie that are very infamous and that are very memorable to me. Is when he hangs Leatherface hangs the woman on the meat hook, and then she has to watch as he cuts up the other guy with a chainsaw. Yeah. And it's not shown explicitly, but it's like very odd. That's what's happening. And that's just, I think, one of the most, that's like a flashpoint of horror movies of just like, this is really happening in a movie. And there's no blood. Other than, there's a little bit showing the blood going down it like into the bucket below or whatever. But that other than that, it's a pretty bloodless scene relatively, but it's still that
By
violent.
imagination,
Yeah,
that much,
like
yeah.
and then even another famous scene is when they're trying to kill the Marilyn Burns character towards the end of the movie. The grandpa's hitting her on the head with that sledgehammer, and how her screaming and the music and them all yelling. It's like there's it's weird to say that it isn't inherently violent because it is, but that's what is, I think, obviously is effective about the movie is it isn't as bad as people remember. It's worse.
Yeah.
In certain ways. It's worse than they even remember because it's not showing a lot of very explicit gruesomeness, but it's so weird. It just pulls it off in the same way that rightfully got people angry, and I think, but obviously it's, great, so whatever.
Right.
But
and this movie's been talked about for its, what I would say is, quote, realism. And realism in fiction in general, and specifically horror movies, is something that's always open interpretation and debate. But again, I think, to me, what is so scary about this movie is how it is shot. That adds a sense of realism to it. It almost sometimes is a cinema verite look at this weird, bizarre, forgotten family that needs to stay forgotten in many ways, but you never get so briefly and memorably remembered. How for you is this movie memorable, and maybe it's, quote, realism, or how it portrays this situation in a way that maybe not be exactly accurate to something that would happen, but is an approximation of reality?
Well, and another thing about, I'll jump to the end of the movie where Marilyn Burns escapes, and the movie just ends.
Yeah.
Because you would assume at a certain point, okay, well, there's going to be people coming out there to find them and arrest them, or they wouldn't go down without a fight, obviously, so they would be killed or whatever.
Yeah.
But the movie is like not interested in that as a concept. It's like, well, the horror is over. It's over now. Like, whatever. But somebody interestingly wrote in that story that, or in one of the reviews rather that we read, that in Texas you could legally shoot somebody on your front lawn for trespassing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, maybe they would be able to come up with some lie about, well, actually this is what happened, and they came in to fight us.
Their word against hers,
right.
Yeah.
And so that is even scarier in its own way to think about, okay, well, what did actually happen at the end of the movie? But it doesn't matter because the movie's over.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that, like I said, it's a no-frills, up-front, in-your-face movie that is very gritty and realistic. And represents, like we've said, kind of a part of America that to these type of people, this is reality. And then I think that's, like we've said, is what's most frightening about it. Mm-hmm. It's in the here and the now, and I mean, when we've driven out to the Outer Banks, I always call it the certain areas out there. I call it the Texas Chainsaw country or whatever, because like on the way to the Outer Banks, there's a certain area where it's just all this very desolate, open farmland, and if you'll look on the side of the road, there's just these houses off in the trees somewhere. Randomly once I remember seeing, and it wasn't there the last time we went through there, but there was a house that there was like a board, like a piece of plywood board that somebody had spray painted, come back now I've got cameras or something, and it was all like misspelled really badly, like, and it made me think about that. And I wasn't frightened to drive through there. It's a very relatively heavy highway because that's the only way you can get to the Outer Banks. So like, it's even more populated than this place was. But there's just these certain parts of America like that. We sometimes think we're the rural folks where we live, but there are far more rural parts of America that who knows what goes on out there. And that's not to say, I don't want to paint that as all these people are weird and kooks, but there's a certain amount of lack of American promise that happens out there that people get so isolated from the American dream that it becomes the American nightmare. Right. I guess that's a very kind of corny way to put it, but it that I think is what is so realistic about it, because I've seen places like that out there even now that I wonder about what goes on out there.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
The movie made $30.9 million in 1974. It was made for between 80 to 140,000. In total, by now in 2019, it's made over $150 million. So people like it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was its own way a box office smash for the budget it was produced at, especially. And again, this was I think an era in the 70s where horror was becoming a little bit more, quote, legitimized or, quote, more mainstream. I mean, with the success of The Exorcist, certainly, but even later on in the decade, The Omen, and then most especially with The Shining later on in 80. The horror was taking on a little bit more of a import and a little bit more of a seen as something that could be more reflective of society than it had been perceived in the past. But again, it's interesting that divide of, okay, this is reflecting this truth that maybe is out there, but it still feels very raw and very disreputable, and that still, even to this day, adds to the reputation the movie possesses, I think, is that sense of truth-telling, but in a very vulgarized, destructive method, so to speak, what this movie is. And so, it's obviously produced its own franchise. As I said earlier, the only one of these I have seen is the
R. Lee Ermey remake.
The R. Lee Ermey remake, which was perfectly fine and okay. It was basically, it wasn't shot for shot, but it was pretty beat for beat a remake of this. And I specifically remember seeing the poster for that a lot growing up, going to the Lenore Carmack twin double screen theater there, seeing that poster of a period and being scared by how intense it looked. As we said, I know the sequel that was produced in the 80s is kind of a satirical take on it, and I'd be interested to see it, but haven't yet to see it. The biggest, most obvious influence we can think of, I think, collectively, is Rob Zombie, as you've already mentioned. House of a Thousand Corpses, in many ways, feels like Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, almost, with the whole family that he unveiled in that. How do you think either Rob Zombie or films in general have carried on the torch of this movie all these many years later?
Well, obviously nothing can touch it. I mean, it is so sacrosanct and idiosyncratic in what it did and what it means to movies in general. But I mean, I feel like, there have been some good cosplays of it. I think that House of a Thousand Corpses is the most obvious one. In that sense, I think what people can add to it is their own either sensibility or sense of humor, in the case of Rob Zombie, to actually make it definitively kind of funny. And like I said, the only person who's really ever done horror comedy, in my opinion, like definitively, is Rob Zombie. Because I find that to not exist for the most part. We've talked about that before. So in that sense, I guess it's whatever you can add to it in your own way, I guess, is what comes to it. But the bare bones baseness of what this is so simple, yet it's just like, well, you can't ever do that again.
Right.
Because it is so shocking in the first instance that it's kind of impossible to...
Yeah, I think the only thing that can hold a candle to it, and it's a very different kind of movie, is something like the Blair Witch Project, in terms of just like... Of course, that's not the, quote, narratively, the next Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but in terms of that level of disorientingness, and in terms of, like, medium changing ingenuity, or just what's the, quote, next realm of terror, or something like that, is, again, not a beat-for-beat remake of that, couldn't be, but, like, is, like, the newer generations have attempted to do their own version of what is unexpected and terrifying in their own decades or ways or eras. I think that very much, every few generations you get a horror movie, because every few generations horror movies get stale, and they're like, all right, what can you do new? And there's always some new weird thing to do to keep audiences as scared as ever. Anything else to add?
No, not really, other than that I think this movie is really great. It's probably my second favorite horror movie other than The Shining, I'd say.
It's not a movie I've personally seen a particular lot, but I really hold in high regard and enjoy it every time I watch it.
So, really effective. So we're gonna enjoy, I guess, as much as you can enjoy a movie like this, which is actually quite a bit. Strangely.
Well, again, coming off of Funny Games, a movie that has some very valid points it makes at the same time, is that this kind of enjoys being a horror movie or being what it is in a way that movie holds not only, well, I feel like it holds us in contempt, but also so secretly itself in contempt. And this doesn't do that as much. It's more just trying to expose us to things and parts of America that maybe we would be best left forgotten.
Yep.
So we're going to play the trailer for the movie, and then we're going to jump right into it.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close, just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
And here we are. We're back. I've never seen that trailer before. That's quite intense.
It's pretty infamous. Almost as infamous as the movie itself. Really great tagline, of course, at the end of once you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it. Is that not only saying, can you believe what you saw, but also in its own way, I guess, saying, what is the movie really about? But anyway, yeah, good trailer.
Yeah,
very Grindhouse kind of trailer.
Yes.
But I was going to talk real quickly about the rating. Obviously, this is an R. But I was reading here on Wikipedia. I want to read what it says. There's kind of a paragraph about it. It says, Hooper reportedly hoped that the Motion Picture Association of America would give the complete uncut release print a PG rating due to its minimal amount of visible gore. Instead, it was originally rated X. After several minutes were cut, it was resubmitted to the MPAA and received an R rating. I wonder what they cut. I don't really know. A distributor apparently restored the offending material, but at least one theater presented the full version under an R. So somewhere it got shown, but in San Francisco, cinemagoers walked out of theaters in disgust, and in February 1976, 2 theaters in Ottawa, Canada were advised by local police to withdraw the film lest they face morality charges.
That's something I always forget sometimes, is that there were long eras of cinema where there were, like, if you screened certain movies that you could face morality or obscenity, like laws or charges.
Well, and I was just reading here, obviously the movie was censored all over the place, particularly in England. In England, supposedly, it was against whatever film code. They had to even have the word chainsaw in a title. So they had to, like, change it, I guess. I don't know, which I just find... Maybe that's part of why they changed the name and edited it to be Chainsaw. I don't know. But I think that was in the original movie, though. Okay. So, anyway, I don't know. But, yeah, obviously the rating of this movie is its own story. But... it's rated R.
As to the infamous.
So if you don't know what you're getting into at this point, I guess...
Before we start the movie, why don't you talk a little briefly about this
what
Blu-ray?
What we're watching it on is this kind of more specialty Blu-ray that was put out nearly, well, I guess about 7 years ago now, because it was for the 40th anniversary. It was a 4K restoration, but the Bluray itself is just a Blu-ray.
1080, yeah.
But they
probably put it out since.
That's what I was thinking. They probably have. But it's a really good set. It has 4 different commentaries, which I haven't listened to any of.
Maybe the next one they'll throw this on there.
Tobe Hooper, I don't know. Yeah, there's been a lot of commentaries about this movie already, which we haven't listened to, funny enough. But yeah. One with Tobe Hooper, Gunnar Hansen, and Daniel Pearl. I think that'd probably be the most interesting one. And then an actors one with Marilyn Burns, Alan Danziger, Paul A. Partain, and production designer Robert Burns.
They're probably all talking about how awful the movie.
Yeah, that would be its own thing. Yeah, a new commentary with writer, producer, director Tobe Hooper, so kind of an extra one with him. And then a commentary with cinematographer Daniel Pearl, editor J. Larry Carroll, and sound recordist Ted Nicola. I don't know how you say that. That would be an interesting one too, talking about, I guess, more of the kind of specifics of how they made the movie. So I've been wanting to actually go through those because that's a lot of stuff. But
yeah.
Then also there's all kinds of other stuff on a bonus disc. There's a documentary called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Shocking Truth. I've watched that. It's pretty interesting. Flesh Wounds, 7 Stories of the Saw, a tour of the house itself with Gunnar Hansen, Off the Hook with Terry McMahon. I guess that's talking about her scene with the hook, I guess. Business of Chainsaw, an interview with production manager Ron Bosman. That would be really interesting, talking about trying to get this movie sold, because deleted scenes and outtakes, Grandpa's Tales, an interview with John Dugan. Cutting Chainsaw, an interview with editor J. Larry Carroll. That would also be interesting, obviously, what they had to edit.
Yeah.
More deleted scenes and outtakes, blooper reel.
Blooper reel.
Yeah. More outtakes.
That should have put over the credits.
Just a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool. I haven't actually went through it as much as I'd like to. It's a really nice little kind of set of stuff.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah,
Good deal.
Yep.
All right, so we're
For a
watching
pretty
the
ugly
Blu-ray,
movie, but beautiful movie.
Hitting play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A Vortex, Hinkle, and Hooper production. Hooper, where are you?
Hooper, where are you? Sadly passed away.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about any of his other movies, but we haven't really seen any, I should say. I've seen that Salem's Lot for TV he did, which was okay, but I've seen the Poltergeist remake. I haven't seen the original.
Yeah, and that whole movie, I don't even know. I've not looked into that long enough. I know there's a whole controversy of whether or not he or Steven Spielberg directed that.
Yeah.
So but speaking of him doing Salem's Lot, I think he would have made some good Stephen King adaptions, but if he had been given more of a chance. But this is by far, obviously, the movie he's most associated with. But it's interesting, like somebody like John Carpenter, who made Halloween, and that is very much probably the movie he'll be most associated with. He's still made enough other things to be talked about in other ways. But I mean, The Thing also is obviously huge. Always creepy when you give an exact date in the past, you know.
This is one of the most effective and creepy openings in any movie, of the sounds of them digging up a body and then them eating. It was like, wow. And then the flash bulbs too of it.
Yeah. Creepy stuff.
We forgot to close the windows.
You can't have anybody knowing what we're doing in here.
Yeah. Like anybody could see in anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah, so this is definitely PG worthy.
Yeah.
Already. I know what he means. Yeah. I know what he's trying to say.
Well, at that time, the rating system was so new for that.
Yeah, that's true.
I can believe that would have been a consideration. But yeah.
Because even if PG-13 were around, there's just we talk about this all the time.
It's no way.
There's some movies that just do not make the cut of.
Yeah.
Even if it's like they don't have anything that's. One we bring up all the time is something like There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
Being rated R. Could it be rated PG-13? Sure. But just considering what the movie's about and the themes of the movie and it being for a quote just more mature audiences, of course it'd be R. Oh, that's beautiful. He needs some SPF 6000, I think. And again, what's the world that this was produced in and came out into in the 70s is, again, that was like the golden age of serial killers. Just like every day there was some new freak out doing something out there bizarre.
Yeah. I really like over these credits, too, that it's just all the stuff that they find on the radio reports here is like all so bleak and awful. All the stuff it talks about is just like, wow.
Yeah.
And the imagery of this opening too is something.
And, you know, obviously, the 70s, even in this, is reflecting the energy crisis that was going on,
right.
and then the volatileness of those as well. Fighting fires. Cholera.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, you know, every time period has its own version of nihilism or apocalypse, and the 70s was no different in terms of its era.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was that version of the 70s compared to the 60s. The 60s was outright nuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
Right. The 70s is more of this, like, slow, eternal, internal decay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that associates with, you know. I mean, again, speaking of Stephen King, or The Stand, I think that's why that book is so great in the 70s, is it's tied to all that stuff in the 70s.
Something about this movie I find really interesting is that every time it shows the sun, it's like there's all this blackness around it.
Oh, so it's like the moon. Like,
yeah. Because later it shows that later on, too, but... I remember originally I heard they wanted to have, instead of this armadillo, a dead horse by the side of the road.
Yeah.
But they, like, couldn't... I don't think it was so much they couldn't functionally do that as it was that they just felt that was too far or something, even then. And they had to make that, I think, the armadillo. It wasn't a real armadillo. They, like, made it... Well, it might have been taxidermied, but they didn't kill it to do it.
Man, its genitals have been removed. That's nice to hear. But yeah, this restoration looks really good.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, this was the scene he supposedly had the money on him. How many shots we had of that? That's a very exploitation kind of way to do that.
We get it.
Yeah. Right, and these kids are real into this whole like astronomy and all that, astro whatever, you know.
Jerry. Come on, Jerry. Your old lady. Yeah, that's not. You don't hear that get said a lot anymore.
Thankfully not.
Yeah, that's a dumb term.
There's a lot of things that's problematic. I don't think we have to explain why.
Yeah.
This guy.
Using an old tires and lawn chair.
Yeah. This guy reminds me of like Snoop Dogg or something. Don't you think? Like kind of.
I see things play like
like More time for us, as he said in less of him means there's more time for us, as he said in The Beach Bum. Okay.
This particular way the film stock kind of looks and griminess of it kind of reminds me of we mentioned this recently anyways, the amusement park, the Romero film.
Yeah.
As far as what this kind of era cheap film looks like years later restored.
Yeah, it was their grandpa that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another thing too that adds to the atmosphere of this movie. Obviously, Texas is known as one of the great homes of beef and cattle and barbecue, and
Yeah. I think the original title of this movie was going to be Head Cheese. Originally, so.
Well, they picked the right title, I gotta say, because I don't know about head cheese. Because to me, part of the power of this movie, as great as the movie itself is the brazenness of the title.
He's talking about like that weapon that Anton Chigurh uses in No Country for Old Men.
It wouldn't be that long. I mean, that story takes place in 1980. That wouldn't be that far off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of, it said how hot it was. One of the last times I watched this movie was at college. I might have told part of this story before on here. I can't remember, where our air conditioner went out when we got back from being home from a hurricane, and the people had come in and worked on the dorm a little bit, and they had jacked it down so far it froze. So we got back there, and it had been sitting in the heat. It was in October, but it was like still hot, in Wilmington. And it was so hot in there, and we got it fixed like the next morning, but we had to stay just one night with it real hot.
Yeah.
By the way, I think we just picked up Dracula.
Him in the back of our Dragula.
Yeah. Speaking of. And anyway, we decided to watch this movie. I kind of did that on purpose because I want to see what that'll be like.
Too,
Yeah, and it was
Spooktober.
It was an interesting experience to feel the heat and watch this movie. And it's not one I would recommend, but I'd seen this movie a bunch of times before then, so I kind of knew what I was doing. But this picture he shows him.
There you go. Head cheese. Just funny, Sounds utterly disgusting.
Especially at this time, like in movies like Tuki Buki or other, especially a lot of African or third world counter cinema movies showed a lot of these cattle executions and stuff.
And and I frankly get what the point of a lot of that was. It was trying to make you think about capitalism and make you think about the dehumanizing nature of Western civilization, basically.
Right.
And maybe I get your point, but you're still showing me put to death an animal, and one can easily say, well, you're not even thinking about that every time you eat a cheeseburger or something. I guess true, but it's just, I don't know, very off-putting, like, to see that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because I remember we watched some in movies in class and people would just get up and walk out while those parts, I remember.
Meanwhile.
Yeah, whack job here.
Yeah. I mean, ain't that how you'd be? It's like, what?
Yeah, I'd be like,
this music, by the way.
This guy looks like he'd be Charlie Manson with a weird birthmark on his face about.
But this music. Did you read that? There's this song called Dead Skunk it talked about that kind of inspired this movie, sort of. Did you listen to that?
No.
It's funny. It's a really weird, morbid, kind of funny song. Just about a dead skunk.
We don't know if Drew's famous doing a song about that, so that won't be what ends us today. But
I'm sure it is, man. It ain't a knife; it's like a razor blade, but whatever.
Yeah.
I love the scene keeps just happening. Yeah. Like, okay, well that happened, but now we're gonna be like, oh well. Meanwhile, he's just bleeding everywhere.
Yeah. I don't think he's right. That boy ain't right.
I just love that guy's just like driving and not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah, what are y'all gasping for back there? And he takes one look at what he looks like. What the
hell? Oh, like he's all offended.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, you don't really like me, do you?
Like, no. I think it's interesting. It never shows what the picture looks like.
Yeah.
Like,
no dice.
Meanwhile, they're talking about him back there. Like, looks like James Franco.
He kind of does, yeah.
So he's like, well, here's my response. Where the heck did he get Tim Foyle at? I think it was that, complicated machinery out there.
Yeah.
The music.
It's like daggum gunpowder or something.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
So. The music cue here. Like, pull over.
Come on, Jerry.
Yeah, like, seriously. What a child.
He's still bleeding himself, I'm sure, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, quite literally, but
yeah, you don't have to worry about that now. Yeah, let's get back to that crap.
Well, if he was making fun of it earlier, and then
now I want to hear. Oh, Jerry. This guy just chilling, vibing, going fishing worms.
I've thought a lot about that moment where it's like you can tell that guy's literally stared at the sun forever, and that's what he sees when he sees it. Is like that's my interpretation of that anyway. Because it's like that's literally shows he has nothing to do other than that. Like,
remember in elementary school, a kid I knew stared at the sun for like 5 minutes and said all he saw was black. Like for a while.
Yeah.
Barbecue. No, it doesn't say we serve barbecue. It says we slaughter barbecue.
That what it said?
That's what it says on the little sign.
Oh, I didn't even see it.
The Coke sign. It says we slaughter.
Oh yeah, I can see it now.
Like, not well, we serve it. Like we slaughter it.
This guy kind of reminds me of Jimmy Carter. Meets like Ed Sullivan or something.
Yeah, we got a leather face around his pot here. Yeah,
maybe. It's like either you did or you didn't. You didn't maybe. So he's kind of telling him, don't go do it.
Yeah. Well, we want you.
Yeah. That's always been a fear of mine, running out of gas.
Yeah, I've thankfully never done that yet. Came close a time or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know. Not really.
No.
I think that guy took the cake, but. Just that blood just casually being on the side of it.
That guy's still looking at the sun.
Yeah. Well, back on the road.
Yeah.
The freaks are in the rear view. I've never really thought much about the score of this movie before. You pointed it out earlier.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was Hooper and somebody else that did it, but hear it very subtly here and there. Kind of abandoned and overgrown this place looks.
Yeah. Looks like the birthplace of Bela Lugosi, the Burger King.
Dracula.
Crosstalk.
If we ever do a Bible podcast, that's what we'll call it.
Yeah.
Crosstalk.
I mean, overlapping dialogue.
Mm-hmm. What's he got in his mouth? Like
that barbecue, I guess.
Jerry's at it again, you know.
Okay.
All right. Something a lot of slasher movies rely on is kind of a cast of characters that are usually younger and usually loud, obnoxious, naive, you know. It's never a good sign. Don't go in that doorway. Don't go down that road.
It's interesting though that here in a minute they see that like those kind of weird totems or cairns hanging around. It's almost like they've taken over the house almost,
right.
From over behind over there.
Right.
Just looking around.
Just vibing. What could have been the pageantry this place once held?
Look at the wallpaper.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that on 1.5 speed.
Yeah, one day we'll do that.
I love all this is followed up by him hurting himself here.
Mm-hmm. I guess he's supposed to be our comic relief character, I guess, a little bit, but
well, he is the last of the group killed, so
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the freak's belongings? Yeah, it's not creepy at all.
How hot it is, you can see it in the air.
Oh, yeah, so I was going to ask, here, temperature check for you.
No. Well, I felt it in
Yeah,
its own way.
that's true.
It got up
That was
to
a
about
4D viewing for you.
80-some degrees in there that night. I know this would be like 100 degrees or more, but that's funny. This is where the swimming hole was supposed to be, but
Well, it once was.
dried up.
That swimming hole was not wet anymore.
It's an interesting reveal to the house.
Yeah.
No, it's a very obvious image of metaphor, but I think it's very genius. They put like a railroad spike through a clock, like time has stopped. Like,
Very true. Something about this cast of characters reminds me of the Geico ad. Have you seen that where it's like these kids are like, if you're in a horror movie, you don't make dumb decisions or whatever. And the guy's like wearing a mask and he's almost annoyed how stupid they're acting.
He like lifts it up and like,
It's like, we should split up. It's like, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Why can't we just get into the running car? And it's like, are you crazy? Let's hide among the chainsaws. Smart idea. And then they're head for the cemetery at the very end.
Yeah.
There's that sound, the generator.
Similar though.
Hello, Wisconsin. That 70s show.
Yeah. Hello, Wisconsin. I was just confused by what that was supposed to mean when I was younger because I didn't understand it's like supposed to be like a rock band at a concert or whatever. But I was like, what? Like, hello, Wisconsin. Like, it's funny because the house still looks relatively like inviting enough because it has the the swing and Kind of reminds me of some houses you see around here.
Yeah.
Certain places look like that. They're like a tooth.
I'll be like, yeah, I'm headed out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever find a human tooth laying on somebody's porch, just leave.
And the place looks kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, go in the place that has pelts just hanging from the wall. Intriguing enough to go, what's in there?
Yeah. Of course, obviously, this is a very abrupt, like, oh, this is what the movie is now moment.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw this, I was pretty shocked by that kind of moment, revelation.
It's a really impressive shot to get under the swing like that.
Yeah.
They might have had it a little bit more off the ground than it looked like it was.
Probably, yeah.
Well, I know I read in one of those things we read about that they used some track that some of them had or something.
Mm-hmm.
We watched this scene in film school. We've talked about him on here before, Dr. Case.
Yeah.
This is like his favorite movie.
Yeah, he's a big fan.
And because he's into a lot of like more independent and kind of trashy movie, or not trashy necessarily, but a lot more like, low budget.
He was the one I had the third world counter cinema class with.
And he showed us this scene and kind of wanted us to talk about it, and it was just interesting to talk about with other people. I could tell some people hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
They're like, what? Like,
yeah, it's a lot to talk about if you're not at least seen the whole thing.
Right. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, of this stuff here. Yeah, and I think in one of those things that talk about with this scene, or just in scenes in general in the movie, of it's like all these random things that you would find in normal houses kind of turned on its head of like, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Turned on its head cheese.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of like a bird in a cage, it's like a chicken.
Yeah.
Like, and then this obviously of like a couch.
Mm-hmm. You got bones all over it.
And of course, even talking about the idea of like hunting trophies and stuff.
Yeah.
The way he shoots this is so like off-putting too.
Disorienting. Yeah. It also increases the dread because it's like the longer she's in here looking, and the higher the chances are somebody's going to come in and get her. So it just has that internal ticking clock in our heads as an audience.
They're picking up all out of her shoes.
One thing that's especially scary about Leatherface as a figure is how big and lumbering he is, but how fast and agile he is too. Just
right. Yeah, I know this is like one of the biggest things about the movie people talk about literally putting a woman on a meat hook and kind of like what that means, which I feel like the movie itself is saying something about that with horror movies doing that, but you know, to play devil's advocate for the movie, but yeah, I mean, you know. What's so weird about
titular chainsaw.
That moment of him touching it, it's like he didn't know how to work it for a few seconds. It's like, what? Like, it's even weirder, like. But like I was saying earlier, this is a case in point for a scene that doesn't have that much gore in it, literally. But like, this is in a movie.
Yeah,
this is literally happening in a movie.
Yeah,
like, you know,
very
and
shocking,
like,
yeah. No question. This would be one of your times in life you need to be worried.
Zip codes were a thing then, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Last. It's funny, they sound very Texan, those two, but everybody else is like, are y'all from like New York? Where are you from?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like,
Goes Jerry.
That shirt is such a choice, you know?
Such a Jerry choice, you know? Think about all the kind of things Jerry would do. This would be one of them.
By the way, we're already like 40 minutes into this movie, so.
That's a philosophy right there.
Yeah.
Everything means something, I guess.
Well, that would mean everything means nothing, man. Just walking
like he
around.
gained enlightenment in that shot. Just say how the sun got bigger. This movie's interesting. Some of the horror takes place in the daytime, and then some at night. Again, as you said, it's interesting. This house does look nicer than what I remembered it to look. It's almost like, if nothing else, these, the people who live here, that if they can't take pride in anything much in their life, they can take pride in the way their house looks, if nothing else.
Plus, they probably want it to look a little more inviting on the outside, so that people come up to it and then they can kill them. I guess.
A goodie room,
yeah. Whatever that is.
Yeah. Goofing on Jerry.
Supposedly, with that moment, I think I heard that they were counting down for when the shot was going to start, and they didn't tell that Jerry guy when exactly he was going to come out, and he did it more ahead of time so that it scared him more or whatever.
Right. That's funny.
Did that a lot in The Exorcist, I've heard of certain things.
Yeah.
William Friedkin wasn't very nice to his actors ever, so he's kind of an a-hole, by the way. Good filmmaker, but...
Him and Hackman, I know, didn't get along making French Connection, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary recently. Teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So one by one, they're slowly getting picked off now. This is down to 2 already.
Yep.
It'd be just like Jerry to go off and die and then leave him. Hey, after all that, oh yeah, hey, by the way. And we gonna wait a minute. I've got to run to the restroom very quickly. I'll be back.
Okay.
Feel free to.
I'll hang them on. Yeah. Fighting over a flashlight. Of course, horror trope of, oh, don't have the keys or the car won't start. But who knows how much gas it even have anyway. Also interesting that they kept the lights on, but there's no keys in the car. I don't really know how they did that, but... very light comedy there of that she was just waiting, but he thought she was real far away. This is going to be the beginning of, like I said, what I think is probably the best. I was just saying it's going to be the beginning of what I think is one of the best chase scenes in the movie. I was saying, you know, like how the lights were on, but they didn't have the keys on the van.
Yeah.
So it's like, how'd that happen? But
yeah.
Whatever. I don't know.
Well, I guess you could open the door and the lights would come on. You mean
no?
I
mean the
car?
headlights.
Oh,
were on.
right. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think they had any interior lights.
Yeah, I was misunderstanding what you said.
Through all these brambles.
It is interesting that they decision to make one of these characters be in a wheelchair as this natural obstacle to the whole situation to overcome or endure. Push down.
Sounds like people I know, you know, like that southern accent.
Yeah.
Get back and push down.
You gonna get. Oh my god.
It was very abrupt. Somebody had written in some of the stuff we read that it's like, to her these are obstacles, but to him he can just cut right through them. You know?
Right.
Weird, he kept like having those jump zooms, like. Another weird thing about the Leatherface outfit is he's like in perpetuity wearing his like slaughterhouse clothes, like, you know. until later, which we'll talk about how weird that is. But
as Gunnar Hansen's done much outside of.
I don't think
this.
so.
Let's see. He died about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of remember when he died, I think.
Yeah, there's like a lot of horror stuff. Yeah, not really. He was in a movie in 1988 called Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. So
okay.
It doesn't even look like he was even in any of the sequels, really. He was in Chainsaw 3D cameo.
Okay. And the weirdness of this.
Yeah.
Just jumped out the window.
I mean, yeah, that's what it takes. Like, kind of that constant soundtrack of the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Something you just get so accustomed to hearing, you don't even think about it as a murderous weapon anymore.
Right,
it's just like, oh, yeah.
Sort of how dark it was there. That was like the only thing you
Yeah.
could really see to feel it was the chainsaw's blade. Like,
it's just ironic. It occurred to me too, and I teach this to my American history students, is that the Boston Massacre, in quotes, was only like 5 people who died there.
Yeah.
And you know how 5 is bad, but when you think of massacre, you think of dozens of people or whatever. And that this is called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was 4 who die, and then 5, the 5th gets away or whatever. But it's interesting the correlation in that, because massacre just makes it sound like this big, massive bloodbath.
Well, and I think that's part of the point of the title is because if this were be a real news story, it would have that kind of tabloid name to itself.
Right. Yeah, it would. You talking about it on Inside Edition?
Yeah. The
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You know, if you ever watched Inside Edition, you probably know what we're talking about.
We've seen way too much of it.
Yeah.
Here, sure.
The American Intellectual Massacre.
Yeah. The Daily one,
Intellectualism isn't the weapon in that, by the way.
How goofy he looks, just kind of jogging after him with that. That's what's scary, is how close he is behind her.
Yeah. There's been a couple times, though, he's kind of like
held up a little bit.
Well, it's like he runs around in these weird like arcs and circles that don't make any sense. Like,
yeah.
Jerry, like.
He waited that long to tell her that?
Yeah.
just leave the door open. Which I know he's part of it, but.
Low of 81 degrees, current temperature 96.
Oh, gosh. That heat.
Yeah, because the movie, that's another thing I want to say earlier, this movie never definitively says that it is them who have robbed these graves, even though that's the implication.
Mm-hmm.
It never definitively actually says that that's the case, which I find interesting that it's like there could be other freaks out there is kind of what it's saying in a weird way, you know?
Yeah.
Love he fights her with a broom, like one of the weirdest scenes in any movie. Like
smacking her with the broom.
Yeah,
the little sound, Foley sound.
Well, he broke the broom handle. The way the scene's lit has always been memorable to me. How bright everything is.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of all that barbecue back there?
Yeah.
Just like...
kind of makes me a little hungry, but then in the context of everything else, I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you know, I guess obviously part of the implication that you've probably already figured out, viewers, is that they are cooking people and feeding it to whoever comes by. So, you know, there you go.
That would obviously be disgusting to eat human.
Yep. Franklin was eating it.
Yeah. I need to get a new broom. I'm just saying.
He ain't the cleanest guy in the world. I think he'll be all right. He'll probably do some crap like making brooms out of human hair or something, you know, like...
I mean, they got a lot of time on their hands, so...
Really wish that the Guess Who song No Time would have played in the No Time to Die yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Maybe.
No time!
There was that one moment we've been laughing about that the new 007 was like, you know what time it is to somebody? And they say, what? It's like, time to die. And then,
yeah.
Which we always quote from Blade Runner.
Meanwhile, you hear he was saying about cost of electricity, like I said, that energy crisis too. Like, oh, can't even have electricity now. Like he's just getting bored, I guess. Like, which I mean, he's a sicko, so
yeah. Bored sicko.
I think this guy was in the sequel because I've seen some of him in that. I think. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think part of that movie is all about them. Like, yeah, look this up about them. Like, wait, what this moment later where the headlights come up to the house. Oh, that's going to be here in a minute. But in the sequel, I think there was something like that. They were taking their like barbecue business on the road and were like going to these like bake-offs or something. Like, I don't remember exactly, but
wait, did you know there was an Atari 2600 Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game? Never heard of that. Wow.
Well, there's our old friend.
Your boy. Says serves as a parody sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, also directed and co-written by Hooper. Written by L.M. Kit Carson, who was also he was one of the co-writers of Paris, Texas with Sam Shepard.
No, it's that there's a chili cook-off, the Texas Oklahoma chili cook-off they go to.
We need to see this sometimes.
Of course, the Breakfast Club poster type thing they got going on there. That shot is what I was talking about. Where the
Bill Moseley's in it.
Yeah. Because I got a video on my phone I'll show you later that Ryan had sent to me from that. It's funny.
And you said Ebert only gave it 1 star out of 4.
I know that one obviously is much more of an explicit comedy.
Yeah.
And it's trying to be a little bit more
It's considerably
funny.
more graphic and violent than this is.
Yeah, well, it's in the 80s, I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe he's the only reason all this is staying kind of beautified, if even. Oh, they've got the wheelchair already over there in the corner.
You know, another movie that just now occurred to me, and I feel stupid just now thinking about this. This kind of whole reminds me of is Deliverance.
Yeah.
In terms of these like hicks in the middle of nowhere terrorizing these people who are visiting or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Very Deliverance-esque. But again, Deliverance, based on the Dickey novel, has, itself a literary import. And, that's kind of, quote, a drama, but...
Yeah.
And got Oscar.
I love here he's, like, trying to look for something to be mad about.
Yeah.
Almost. What do you think about the whole Leatherface dressed as, like, the mother making the meal means?
I don't know.
Because I have some things I'd like to say about that, maybe, but...
I guess that there's no maternal figure in this home at this point, and so just feeling this need to fulfill that role.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
like,
say, I guess, is that some families, it's like people, especially these kind of older time, like this, I imagine, based on old Western family ideas, like that, yes, people have to step into roles. That's usually more of the child son becomes a father, usually more than that. I just find that to be kind of interesting, but
adds the whole demented nature of
right.
all
Oh
this
yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, and also I think
and
that
feels
this
a little
whole,
like Norman Bates-esque
right.
too.
This whole family obviously is this very sick, twisted, dark side of American life, as Norman Mailer would say.
What what Norman Mailer with all this movie?
Well, he's a big fan of Tropic of Cancer, so maybe he liked this. I don't know. Big fan of Henry Miller. So they actually just do call him that.
Mm-hmm. What's scary is she's saying help me, but there's nobody to help.
Nope.
It's a default human setting. You imagine what this whole place smells like.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That was kind of a shocking moment to me because I thought the grandpa was literally dead, rotting corpse,
right.
and then he's actually alive. Can't help but think of what that one American guy in the Mummy said. It's a messed up country.
Yeah. Yeah, really. And that, yeah, I guess the implication is the only thing that keeps him alive is human blood, literally. Like,
yeah.
It's like Frank Pepe. I am Frank Pepe.
Frank Pepe.
Did you know that my pizzas are made with love and human blood?
Anyways.
Enough with the chickens, you know?
Yeah. Hot dog or chicken? Yeah, that'd be my response.
Yeah.
It's crazy. In some ways, at this point, she might be spared as long as she is, just because she's a woman. She can be our mother or
or some
figure.
Weirdness. Yeah. For 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Supposedly this scene in particular was really, really hot to shoot.
Yeah.
Because
the lights
they were in the house and the lights were really hot. Yeah.
Neither one, really. But
no. I always found that to be one of the most random choices in any movie I've ever seen is to cut down to the skull on the table after that. I was just like, what? Wow.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Just her eyes, how green they look.
Yeah.
No, I can't not think of James Franco now. You say that guy looks like him.
How dilated her eyes look because of all the lights.
Yeah, don't do that.
What's so weird about his character is that he's like going back and forth between laughing about it and being like, "No, we don't need to do that." And like within seconds, like
yeah.
another thing that's weird.
Don't cry
is
now.
Saying all these like slaughterhouse terms that I don't understand. I was just like,
What's the interesting irony is that Grandpa looks so out of it. He's probably the one who taught him to be all this sadistic, and he's just can't even do anything. He's just throwing it in about him.
Can't even do it. Like a child.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the second window she's jumped through.
Yeah. Here we go again with the chainsaw. And Bozo in hot pursuit right behind her.
What's interesting too is about where that is that they came in to it from like a back way, but that it's like right off the road, you know.
Right.
Well, there goes his life.
Yeah.
We looked at each other and kind of laughed. Yeah, so
it looked like, you know, it was one of those classic, like, that joke in Austin Powers where
yeah.
like, no!
Yeah, it's like he could have got out of the way.
He was there for a good few seconds. He could have got.
This guy's like, what the hell is going on? Yeah.
Well, he looks out for her. I'll give her that.
Yeah.
Give him that. He pulled her in.
He's the most effective guy in the movie, as it turns
hell
out.
It is.
Yeah.
He's going to be at least some good cannon fodder. My leg! You know?
Gonna run away.
Imagine what that guy's thinking, seeing these three people out on the road. Like, what?
Crashing almost. That guy's just running away. Must thought this shot's weird. It's like from inside the truck here, or on the other side of the truck. Yeah. The guy's like, well, what the hell is any of that?
There you go. One of the most
Movie's
iconic endings ever.
Yep.
Obviously, one of the most memorable. And yeah, I think that so much, as you said, the movie's already over. I mean, so much of the Power Road is how brief it feels, but how evocative it all is. Hitchhiker, Old Man, Leatherface, Grandfather.
Window washer.
Names given. Bearded Man. Cattle truck driver.
Drunk.
Ed Gein. Pickup driver. Wayne Bell, like you said, Tobe Hooper and him did the score.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, deeply disturbing, deeply effective movie still to this day.
It's a movie that, as much as we, commentated it, I think relatively well enough. I don't know. That's up to you to decide, I guess, listener. But, it's a movie that just kind of speaks for itself. It's just like, it is what it is,
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
Stunts, Merry Church.
And, I think you do have, obviously, a big independent film explosion in any decade, but I think a lot of the independent dramas and films of the 80s, I feel like in a lot of ways those movies wouldn't have even been possible without some of these big genre independent hits from the 70s, as far as making the whole concept of independent film a little bit more accessible or playing to larger audience. I think a movie like this makes it a little bit more possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go. Again, as we said, Hooper, he's made some other films here and there, but this was by far his most acclaimed and most accomplished and most iconic.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's obviously a reason why this movie continues to, why we're even doing it and why people continue to watch it, is because it's so its own itself. I mean, it's very shocking, and every horror movie really since this has really just tried to do this again and again. So even a movie as complex and accomplished as Halloween is doing that in its own way. And I believe that it was Black Christmas that came out first, just like 2 weeks before this. But that in its own way is its own kind of important version of that, and is very disturbing in its own way. We may do that one of these days, who knows, on here, but someday, because I think that's pretty good. But not as good as this.
It is good, though. Yeah.
That's a different type of movie, and has its own kind of suspense and mysteries about itself. But
So that does it for this episode on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Up next, I feel like I can just finally just go, just breathe a sigh of relief for what comes next. One of our personal collective favorite movies, 1988's Beetlejuice. Our second Tim Burton film after we did his 2001 Planet of the Apes film. Now, I know I deeply love this movie, but I'm sitting next to someone who has to be one of the biggest fans of this movie on the planet. This movie was something that we grew up with a lot growing up. I mean, we watched it ad nauseum on VHS. We can probably talk about some of that next week. Beetlejuice, where to begin?
I have no clue. I have seen this movie more than any other movie. It's interesting we're going to do a commentary of it because I feel that I'm required, or you know, like that I'm, or what's the word?
Prepared.
Not required, prepared, adequately prepared. But that I'm kind of afraid it'll just become a me quoting the movie the whole time, which I'm going to try not to do. But I think where I can start with that movie, I mean, it's one of the most imaginative movies I've ever seen, and it comes from the mind of Michael McDowell, who is his own kind of institution in his own way. I think people over time have come to his work later on. I actually haven't read any of his books, but he was a horror novelist, very strange guy. I think he died in the 90s from AIDS, actually. But that he wrote the screenplay to Beetlejuice. In its original form, it was much more of an explicit horror film, and had a lot of really weird things about it that we can kind of talk about next week, about what some of those kind of original ideas were, some of which made it into the final film. But then ultimately it kind of was trimmed down into a different movie. Warren Scarron, I believe, was one of the writers that kind of came in and changed some things about it. But then ultimately Tim Burton came along and decided to make the movie, and I think it really is a marriage between Burton and McDowell of their own individual kind of visions going into one thing.
Which is say nothing of all the qualities the actors themselves bring.
Yes.
And, Michael Keaton, I mean, I can't remember what the exact runtime is, but he's famously not in the movie for
probably like 20 minutes.
I think it's less than that.
15 minutes.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But what an impression he leaves.
Yeah.
And just one of the most iconic characters of his career, and much less in the cinema of the 80s, I think, really in general.
Yeah, and I think what is so great about that movie, among so many things, like I said, is just the imagination of it. I mean, the idea, I think what the movie's really about at its very base level is, you know, obviously that is in, like, Connecticut, so it's not like the South, but it's in a very kind of rural, kind of sleepy town that is being overrun by these, like, New York yuppie corporate stooges, basically, and kind of, that's what ultimately I feel like the main metaphor of the movie is kind of the rustic meets the yuppie, and what that meant in the 80s particularly, of the kind of commodification of everything that has only continued, but especially in the 80s was a big deal. And just what a cast of characters that movie has. So many iconic performances and peoples, kind of like the world, of course, that was built with Pee-wee's Big Adventure before that. I think it's kind of
which was
similar.
Burton's debut feature film,
and it's kind of, and that's like, I love that movie even more than Beetlejuice, and it's on certain days my favorite movie. But yeah, I think that's what works about Beetlejuice is it's very attractive at a young age. I watched this a million times on a VHS, and I can kind of talk about that, about the specifics of that VHS, and some kind of changes that were made to the original movie, kind of edits that were made, and why that was. But that I saw that version of it for years and years. It wasn't very much that was different, but just a couple things. But that I saw it constantly. It's a movie that kind of scared me when I was younger, but I loved anyways, and has stuck with me as kind of strangely a comfort movie that I think about and talk about quite a bit.
It's another good movie that to watch as a kid if if it's not too intense for you, to kind of be a little bit of a gateway into more horror-ish or kind of scary
because
stuff.
That's another thing we might argue next week that I've talked about before, is that I don't think the movie is a horror movie, actually. It's more of a fantasy comedy, kind of dark fantasy comedy that has horror elements, but it's not actually explicit, and it's about ghosts. It's about the supernatural, I guess, supernatural comedy, fantasy comedy, because it's not explicitly a horror movie, I don't think.
I think it's a comedy that takes place in the world of a horror movie.
Yeah,
if that makes
or
sense.
sure, yeah. And we can kind of talk about that next week, but it's weird because that would technically be my favorite horror movie if you said, okay, this is a horror movie.
Sure.
But I don't count it as such necessarily. And I'm not saying that my opinion is definitive. I mean, if people think it is, that's fine. But just, I'm honestly not the best person to ask about that movie as far as that goes, because I've seen it so many times I don't even know what it is exactly. You know? But yeah, I've been looking forward to that one. Hopefully this won't be a disappointing one for us, because there's so much to say.
Beetlejuice was one of the first handful of movies that whenever we wanted to start this whole podcast, that was on the list of, well, we need to do that one day.
Right.
And we thought, what better time to do it than here in October.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to some of these more darker movies, and in preparation for a totally different movie at the end, which will be the best.
But actually
of the
shares
movies.
Some similarities with Beetlejuice as well.
But
again,
anyway.
if you want to go back and hear our initial thoughts on Tim Burton on the Planet of the Apes pod, we covered some of that of his.
Yeah,
his
we'll
version.
try to focus more on Beetlejuice this time.
Again, he's a director. He's one of the first directors that when we were getting into movies, you were like, you associated the director's name. Oh, Tim Burton. I know what a Tim Burton movie is and feels like and sounds like and everything. So, again, that first three movies of his, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, and Batman, are all very dear to each of us. And Beetlejuice especially was a very formative movie for us growing up, and so we're going to share some of our thoughts on that next week. So, but before we get into that...
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, because I know you haven't had enough, another dose of Lou Reed!
No. Calm down, Sam. Not that. Instead, we're going to end with yet another Drew's famous cover. This time, She's a Bad Mamma Jamma. Should be said it was originally by Carl Carlton, which I didn't even believe was a real name, and I had to look up and know that it is indeed a real name. What are some of your thoughts of She's a Bad Mamma Jamma in relation to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Well, I guess if maybe somebody could do like a supercut of all the times that Leatherface is dressed up as with the wig and put Bad Mamma Jamma to it. I don't know. Maybe that would be some sick kind of weird.
Not to just add one last little thing about Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah.
It has to be out there. I've not read it. There has to be a lot of writing on like queer readings of this movie in relation to Leatherface dressing up as a woman and what that means in the 70s and this and that. We're not going to be the source for that.
No.
We encourage you to go read people who are more informed on those issues. But in many ways, Leatherface is indeed a bad Mamma Jamma. So
it's a hilarious song. I mean, the lyric of her body measurements are perfect in every dimension. She's got a figure something I don't remember, but she's poetry in motion, a beautiful sight to see. I get so excited viewing her anatomy. I mean, it's a pretty disgusting song in its own way. But I mean, it's very much like a 70s kind of Motown disco dance song. But that it's kind of a party song, and it's on this Drew's famous record. That's why we're doing it.
I think I'm finding with the case with a lot of these music songs we're playing, and it's obvious, is that they're not meant to last the decades. Lyrically, they're just like purely like, we've got a beat, we need lyrics on top of this. What is it? Let's write this in 30 minutes and then be done with it.
As far as that song, the funny thing, and a lot of these songs, the first thing I think of is our mom, because we're sitting in the car. Like, most of the times we've heard it, we've been sitting in the car with her driving somewhere in October, singing along. Both of us sing. I'm not saying I don't sing. We both sing along to the songs. So it's like, I just always think of like that, of riding in the car with mom, listening to these songs. And this song's a little bit of a weirder song as far as that goes, but yeah, funny song anyway. Not as much of King Tut with Funny Games, I think, but Bad Mamma Jamma with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, its own insanity.
So there you
go. But
go.
it's from the Hit Crew, of course.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can. I think we can find that version. I think
Friends of the Pod at this point.
Yeah. If you're out there, Drew's famous Hit Crew,
we love
hit us up. Let's make some more songs.
Yeah,
I'll
collab.
be on it. Yeah.
So, thank you for joining us for this episode on the Texas Chainsaw
Sorry,
Massacre.
didn't get another dose of Lou Reed. We really wanted to,
But this is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.